Okay, it is 7 o'clock, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Mr. Barone, do you want to kind of give a brief explanation of our
I won't be able to give a technical one, but I'll give you a brief. So we've installed a new piece of equipment last week that, for the council's benefit, we used to have to break after a couple hours and then reboot it and put in a new card. And we thought we were with this new piece of equipment, we wouldn't have to do that, but of course, it worked great last week as they installed it and tested it, but tonight it's not. So
this is for video.
For video.
So yeah.
So the audio works fine, so we'll have for sure an audio recording of this council meeting, but not a video.
So we won't have a video, so please, when speaking, speak into your mic and speak clearly so we can get it all on audio, on video, on audio for sure. So
I apologize.
Yeah. So with that, I'd like to just a brief reminder, everyone, please turn your cell phones off or electronic devices or in airplane mode so they don't interrupt our meeting. And first order of business, please join me in Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So thank you and welcome everybody here this evening. And first order, I'd like to make some introductions. I'm Lisa Whalen, I'm the mayor. And to my left are council members, Pam Mortenson, Mike Molitor, John Tschumperlin, Shannon Bruce, and on the end we have our city engineer with WSB, Alyson Fauske. And then we have our city clerk, Kris Linquist, and our public works superintendent, Gary Peters. And then to my right, our city administrator, Mike Barone, our finance director, Brian Grimm. David Abel is our community development director. And then we have sitting in for Ron Batty this evening, our city attorney with Kennedy and Graven is Andrew Biggerstaff. And then on the end we have our chief of police, Paul Falls. So with that, that concludes our introductions. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda?
I don't have a change or an addition, but I am going to request a few minutes during the comp plan discussion. I have about 5 to 10 minutes, no more than 10 minutes of some comments I'd like to make.
I believe that is actually a business item.
Yep.
So, of course, people are allowed to make comments. With that, then, is there approval of the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next, we have special presentations, and we're going to start out with Mr. Abel, kind of giving the community as well as the council an update on the upcoming 2020 census.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. At the last meeting, I was asked to give an update, and I've taken 2 short videos here that the census has put out, and I thought it'd be best to maybe just let them share that information with some of the PR information that they're sharing. So I'll just show these 2 short videos here next.
Can one girl in a small town, an architect in a major city, and a suburban high school coach shape the future of the United States? Yes, they can. Because every 10 years, the census gives us that power. You can shape your future by responding to the 2020 census. Where do we need new roads to make our lives easier? Where will new school programs help our children thrive? Where could a new health clinic benefit neighborhoods? The 2020 census will inform these decisions and shape how billions of dollars will be distributed to communities like yours each year. And in 2020, you can respond to the census online, by phone, or by mail. It's easy, safe, and important. Make sure you and everyone you know is counted. Now is the time for you to get involved. Your community needs you. Together, we can educate and excite, inspire, and make sure every voice is heard. Together, we can shape our future.
I have one here more for you, Madam Mayor and Council. Similar.
As mandated by the U.S. Constitution, America gets one chance each decade to count its population. The census mandated by the U.S. Constitution. Democracy. America gets one chance. The next census in 2020 to count its population. The census is the foundation of our representative democracy. The next census in 2020 will measure a growing and diverse nation. An undertaking like this requires years of research and testing to ensure an accurate and complete count. That's why planning is already underway to make the next census the most efficient, advanced, and effective in history. Through its ongoing research and testing, the Census Bureau has identified 4 key areas in which investing now will save taxpayers money later in 2020, all without sacrificing quality or accuracy. First, past censuses have required the Census Bureau to walk literally every street in every neighborhood to note every housing unit before Census Day. Now, the Census Bureau is using the Postal Service, aerial imagery, and other sources to base its work on maps and addresses that reflect the absolute latest changes to communities. Second, by using information the public has already provided the government, the Census Bureau plans to further reduce the number of residence visits. For instance, reviewing administrative records will provide the data needed in cases where people do not respond, while at the same time identify vacant housing units that otherwise would be visited by a census taker. Utilizing information like this has the potential to save up to $1.4 billion. Third, the Census Bureau is making responding more convenient by offering secure online, phone, or mail options. This will reduce the number of follow-up door-to-door interviews, the most expensive part of any census, saving an estimated $400 million in taxpayer funds. By taking advantage of the rapid changes in technology since the last census, the agency will improve how it conducts and governs operations. For example, digitally transmitting daily staff assignments and case updates will streamline on-the-ground operations and reporting structures, saving up to $2.5 billion. Finally, the 2020 census will provide a new benchmark for all future censuses. By investing now, the nation will save billions in taxpayer dollars later and ensure a quick, easy, and safe count for every person across the United States.
So to that point, Madam Mayor and Council, we as staff have been working with the census on that very point about providing updated maps and addresses with all of the new development that's been occurring out here within our city. So we've had 2 different opportunities to provide them with our most up-to-date address list and maps to them. There are other opportunities if there's volunteers that want to go out and actually do canvassing, as they call it, going door to door to verify addresses. That's typically something, again, that's done by volunteers within the community. We have pretty up-to-date, accurate information, but certainly if people out there want to do that, we can put them in contact with the appropriate people at the Census Bureau. But we have been providing them with that information, hopefully have an up-to-date, accurate address list, if you will, for the city of Minnetrista as the 2020 census rolls out. We'll share both those links on the city's website, any other links that the census sends to us as they approach sending out that information. So that's the updates I have for you tonight.
All right. Thank you. Any questions of staff? All right. With that, we have one more special presentation, and Mr. Grimm, I think that's you.
Yep. Madam Mayor and Council, and I'll try to keep this brief because I know we've had 2 work sessions on this as a between staff and city council. So, but just wanted to also have a chance to have this out there in a regular meeting too. So, I've got about 15 slides. Not quite as high tech as the first census video that had some of the flyover and stuff, but it'll be more nuts and bolts numbers. So, what you'll see later in the business item on the agenda is there was a few options for adopting and approving, by resolution, a preliminary tax levy for 2020. All cities need to do that always by September 30th of each year. So that's what we're looking at. So, yeah, I think I just referenced we met on pretty much had the full work sessions on August 5th and 19th to discuss the preliminary levy and budget. Went over the detail, the general fund, talked roads, talked capital equipment items. And then tonight there's a presentation that sort of summarizes some of that information. Obviously, the goals each year to ensure the city's financial stability is I guess, the number one each year is to balance what we levy and for taxes and what we have in for fund balance for our reserves. We look at our capital equipment we need for doing some public works. I guess a good example today was some of the cleanup from some of the storm. We need equipment to be able to do some of those type of certain items. We look at our service level each year and make sure we're providing good service and the appropriate service to our residents. And then we, especially the last several years, there's been a big focus on our funding our payment management plan and how to do that. So this is just a summary of the three different versions that were in your packet as far as the levy. The main items, to discuss the general fund levy, and you'll see in the subsequent slides here the reason that's going up is really that hadn't increased since I think 2012 or 2000. It's been a lot of years, and we've talked about that while we've been making some more investments in the roads and some other items, mainly the roads. We've pretty much kept our general fund levy the same by using fund balance, and that's been hard to keep doing that every year. The item that was new in this version 1 here is putting $50,000 back into our CIP, our equipment levy. So when you add those up, you see the total gross levy, the fiscal disparities number, which is the number we get back from the county, and then the $4.819 million is what would be levied as our preliminary levy in version 1. Version 2, pretty much everything's the same other than the road maintenance dollars were instead of going up by $125,000, it's going up $50,000. I think from our couple meetings, the discussion, I don't know if version 2 was super popular. I think everyone, or there seemed to be a consensus on the council to keep that road maintenance levy amount at the $600,000. But I'll let the council members speak for themselves on that later. The third version, which was added from the last time we talked, was to take this $50,000 out of the CIP levy, and that was something that was talked about at one of the last meetings. From a personal perspective, I'd like to see that money stay in so we can get back to where we're doing a cash levy more for some of our equipment versus right now we'd have to, by pulling that $50,000 out, that would have to be added in addition to whatever we do for an equipment certificate in 2020. So, whether maybe it'd have to be $750,000 versus $700,000, then paid back over 5 years. So really that $50,000 is just more being pushed out or deferred is how you look at it. It'd be nice if we could get that dollar amount back to 2010, 11, 12. We were levying $300,000 for equipment and paying as we go, but a lot of that money went to got traded off to the roads, which the roads is a priority and needed money also. So it's just trying to balance everything together, and so then you can see what the third option ends up being. Started to talk about the general fund. This was the balance in millions or whatever, so it's been around $2.5 million. It was up to almost $3 million. It came back down. We've been spending down some of that to be able to keep our levy at a lower amount, and that's where we're trying to bump the general fund levy up this year to try to soften the blow of we're using almost $400,000 of fund balance this year to balance our budget. So this helps show that as far as our overall tax levy and what the trend's been. But we've been using reserves, in 2016, 17, 18. That's all actual numbers. The 2019 is a budgeted number, and then 2020 you can see we're trying to reduce the amount we're using in reserves to keep our fund balance percentage, which our policy says to try to keep between 40 and 50 at a minimum of 40%. So you see we're starting to get down towards that mid 40 percentile there, so a percentage. Tax impact. So by just using some of the numbers from the previous slides, taking a 4% increase to valuation, I think 3-4% probably is what a lot of people will see when they get their tax statement in 2020. You can see the tax amount in 2019 versus 2020. Most people, if they get an average valuation increase with that, and this is with that version of the version 1, the 5.87% version, which was the first version there, the one with the largest increase. The annual difference would be anywhere from $29 to $79, and that's for the year, so it's $2 to $6 a month or so for the different valued properties. show these real quickly, or just to, I guess, twofold. One, to show the portion of the tax bill that the city portion is. This is a property of $450,000 in 2019 in West Tonka School District. $1,121 city tax, total tax bill $4,886, 23%. You can see what some of the other is the city share, and what the blue is the county, the school is the red, and the other taxing districts are the purple. You can see if you go just based on where your property is, if you're in the Waconia School District, is total tax dollar change went up to about $5,800. City's portion still the same. It's about, but in that area, you're paying about 19% of your total taxes to the city. So as far as 2020, some of our items, obviously we have some labor contracts, health insurance, some of those type of things. I talked earlier about doing an equipment certificate for our purchases or equipment purchases for 2020 and combining that with our 2018 and 2019. We may have to do a interfund loan at the end of 2019, and we've discussed that a little bit at our last work session. The funding, the $225,000 increase for the roads plan, we showed that earlier, and that's just based on when the road committee in 2012 outlined what we should really be doing for roads. We're phasing this into the dollar amount. I think it was $900,000 back. What our goal is to try to get to per year, but over time. We're using still general fund reserve dollars, about $224,000, to keep the general fund levy at where it's at, and our proposed projected fund balance in the general fund at the end of 2020 would be about that 44%. In summary, so we need to, each year, or this year again, certify our levy by the end of the month here. There's been a few different net levy options presented. Looking for the city council, obviously, to obviously you get to make the final decision on what we do, or there, as every year. Roads, I talked a little bit earlier. Roads is always a big item. Capital projects. Yeah, the general fund levy, I did have that, has not been increased since 2012, and actually had decreased in 2010. So that's just, shows that we need to put a little more money back into our operations and stop using our fund balance there to quite the extent we're using. And then we can keep them as we get further numbers as 2019 goes on. We can the final budget can be worked on through the fall, and the levy, whatever we certify tonight, or if it is tonight, we certify it. Can be left the same or reduced, but it's the ceiling. It can't be increased from whatever we send the county in September here. So that's what I have for now, and then the business items are coming up a little later in the agenda. So
yeah, we'll have more discussion about that. So thank you. Okay, so moving on to persons to be heard. We do have Mr. Lewis signed up. That is an agenda item. Would you like to speak now, or?
I don't have comments now. I put my name down just in case.
Okay. Well, if maybe when we go through this through the sketch plan, if you have comments, you're welcome to make them at that time. All right. So then we'll move on to our consent agenda items. They consist of A, approve our work session meeting minutes from August 19th, 2019. Approve our regular meeting minutes from August 19th, 2019. C is approve claims. D is approve a variance at 395 County Road 110 North. E is approve a step increase for Jesse Schmidt, who is a public safety officer. F is approve a step increase for Josh Brown, also public safety officer. And G is approve a step increase for Carter Osterly, Public Works maintenance worker. Are there any items you wish to remove? If not, is there a motion then to approve consent agenda items A, B, C, D, E, F, and G?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made by Ms. Mortenson and seconded by Ms. Bruce to approve consent agenda items A, B, C, D, E, and F, and G. Any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. Next, we have our public hearings. It does consist of one public, well, sort of two. we can do it all in one. Okay, so public hearing, this is in regards to Woodland Cove. This is the easement vacation for Woodland Cove. I'll let Mr. Abel speak to this first.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. M&I Homes has submitted an application to replat a small portion of the third edition within the Woodland Cove development. As part of that application, we do have an easement vacation that is needed to remove the existing drainage and utility easements on the existing lots within that third phase. Pursuant to Minnesota State statute, we did schedule for a public hearing tonight to consider that easement vacation for those drainage and utility easement. That is the actual, technically, the public hearing that you would need to hold this evening is for those easements vacations. So what the council could do is go ahead and open a public hearing, hear any comments, go ahead and close that, and then we do have a resolution that would approve the vacation of those utility easements. The second item on the agenda, I'll just go ahead and touch on. It does not require a public hearing, but can be acted on after the public hearing. That's the second resolution attached in your packet. The replat, again, is for the third edition within Woodland Cove. Their request is to take 25 existing lots and make 18 wider lots. The applicant has found that the 40 to 50 foot wide lots are more desirable within this phase, and this request will help accommodate that. The main purpose is to also provide for more single-level villa homes, which seem to be selling well within this third phase. The important thing to remember, as council knows, as we go through each phase within Woodland Cove, is that we do have a total unit number that we need to keep in mind as we review each phase or any modification to a phase. The council may recall that there's 1,071 total dwelling units that need to go within the Woodland Cove development. To date, we've had 6 phases platted within the development, which is 555 units. The lot reduction would bring the total down to 3 lots above the preliminary plat approved density, which was 545. So, with this change, we're still in the good. We'll have 548 total units within the development. Again, we just need to be cognizant of that as we keep moving through each phase or any replat. They have, as you recall, there has been some other minor tweaks like this within other phases based on products and what's working and what's not working within the development. So, again, after the public hearing, there's a resolution to vacate the drainage and utility easements, and then we've also got a resolution that approves the Woodland Cove West Rim final plat.
So, Mr. Abel, it seems to me like that's kind of reverse, like we should first discuss and maybe it's kind of, because if we don't approve the change in the plat, then why would you then vacate the easements?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, there's not an easy way of doing this, and given the length of our agenda, we just stuck the items together. Technically, the way our agenda goes, public hearings happen first. So
right.
It really, tomato. I would recommend just go ahead, open the public hearing, take any comments, close, and act in the order in which they're on the agenda.
Yeah, okay. All right. So any other questions of staff from the council at this point? All right. Hearing none, then I will open the public hearing. And if anybody is here this evening that wishes to speak for or against the public portion of the easement vacation for Woodland Cove, it's a as Mr. Abel pointed out, vacation of easements for utilities. So that always requires a public hearing. Is there anybody here that wishes to make comments on that? Okay, I don't think so. So with that, I'll close the public hearing. Can we maybe discuss the replatting first?
However you'd like to do it, Madam Mayor.
All right. Anybody have any issues on replatting this as presented in our packet?
What are the ramifications if at the very end of the entire project they don't hit the 1,071?
We can't. If there was a phase in which would bring them below and they couldn't prove in a future phase that they could make those up, we wouldn't approve that phase until they give us more units.
Okay.
How many phases are there in Woodland Cove? Is there 12?
There's six that have gone in. There are 2 more just strictly residential phases slated, and then it just depends upon how they split up the mixed use, if you will, the commercial and the residential on the other side on the west side of Kings Point Road. That's still an unknown at this point.
Okay, so 2 more phases, residential phases to go. So, yeah. Okay. Any other questions or concerns regarding change in the plat? Okay, then hearing none. So let's start with the Woodland Cove approve the easement vacation for Woodland Cove West Rim replat. Any questions or issues with that? All right. Is there a motion to approve resolution number 105-19?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any further questions or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those approved. All those opposed. Motion passes 5-0. And then a resolution, it's 106-19 to approve the West Rim replat of Woodland Cove phase. It would be part of Phase 6.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made by Ms. Mortenson and seconded by Mr. Tschumperlin. Any further questions? Hearing none. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed. Motion passes 5-0. So now we'll move on to our budget process and approval. So first there's the approval of the 2020, and I'll emphasize preliminary tax levy. And then there'll be a approval of our debt levy. And then also setting a date for the public comments on our levy and budget. So Mr. Grimm?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So the first 10 pages, it sounds like the packet's broken up into a couple of chunks. So this would, I think, be on page 1 of packet 2.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Is just the memo sort of outlining the versions that we just looked at, and just sort of giving sort of the history, of the discussions at the August 5th and 19th meetings. You can see for version 1 as presented, it was a 5.87% increase, and that's the one that's basically pages 2 through 4. And then version 2 was the next 3 pages, was a increase of 4.28%, but that had the lower roads amount. And then the third version, it was a 4.77% increase. It had the roads amount the same as in version 1, but it took out the cash levy for the capital equipment fund. So I don't know with the presentation earlier and the information that was in the packet, maybe I'll just turn it over back to the mayor and council. As far as
Thank you, Brian. So we've had a number of discussions, and Brian's presentation this evening. Any comments or questions?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I spoke to Mr. Barone this morning about option number 3, and I had a discussion with Mr. Grimm as well about taking the $50,000 out of the CIP fund, or the CIP plan, and moving it into equipment certifications. And I was confused because when I looked at all 3 of these options under equipment certifications, all 3 of them have the same amount. And Mr. Grimm explained that if we take that $50,000 out, we're putting it into the 2021 equipment certification.
Well, it'd be the 2020 equipment certificate, but the levy implication would start in 2021 and then 220. Though, be spread over those subsequent 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that by moving that $50,000 out, it looks like it's just reducing the tax levy, but we're just pushing it into next year, and it's not actually reducing the tax levy. It's actually going to be increasing the tax burden on residents because there's going to be interest on that money.
There would be, as we talked about at the last work session, interest rates are low, but there still is an interest rate or whatever. So anytime we don't do a pay-as-you-go or cash, and we do have to do a financing, whether it's for a road project or equipment or whatever, there isn't a cost of interest to it, or basically time is money component. So, yep.
And while I'm talking about this, I'll just put out my preference is option number 2, which is the lowest of the tax levy increases, which is 4.28%, which I still think is a little high, but given the money that we need on roads, I think there's a way to still spend the $600,000 that's in option 1 on roads by taking that money out of the tree fund and putting it into the roads fund. And I think as a council, we need to have a discussion about these special funds, and whenever you have funds set aside that don't have any liabilities in the near future or in the foreseeable future, I think those funds belong back in our general fund reserve. And that's the only way we can get a true picture of our balance sheet, if you will, and how our taxpayers can understand where that money is. When we have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in these funds and then we're raising the tax levy year after year after year, that doesn't make sense to me. And we could so that's a future discussion, but I would prefer taking $75,000 out of the tree fund, moving that into the roads fund, and we would have the 4.28 preliminary tax levy increase with a $600,000 road fund.
Well, that begs a question, kind of more of a legal question. So I understand your concerns, but when we have a specified fund, and that fund has been derived from, let's say in this case, from developers, and they had to pay a fine, if you will, for removing more than they were allowed. So they had to pay into the tree fund. So that's kind of been earmarked and designated for environmental purposes. So maybe, Mr. Biggerstaff, can you explain how that works, or can we just remove the money from that fund and use it for other purposes?
Mayor and Council, I think that's a good question. I think it's a difficult question to answer. I think the general answer is that if the city were to take funds that were raised for a specific purpose from a group of people, it would certainly invite questions and potential challenges about the use of the funds in a different way. I'm not aware of any black letter rule that says you can't do that, but I certainly think that it would raise a number of potential issues, problems, challenges. I also don't know how the city's auditors would look at something like that. So those are all questions I think we'd have to look at more closely before we could really determine whether that would be a prudent thing to do.
And Madam Mayor, I'm suggesting that we have a discussion about that. I think the council would need to look at the resolutions that were passed establishing that fund and the rules around its use, and we would have to come to an agreement about how to do that. And we certainly don't have the time to go into that tonight, but at the very least, I think we have discussed borrowing money from that fund or just moving that money from the fund with Mr. Ellers when he came to speak to us.
I think he suggested you could take out a loan, an interfund loan, basically.
Right, and at a very, very low, if next to nothing, interest rate.
Right.
So that's my preference. That's what I prefer.
Okay. Although it would be hard to base a budget on an assumption that you could use that fund without paying it back, or paying it even, and if you did have to borrow it, let's say legally, you'd still have to pay it back, so something would have to be added into the budget for repayment of that loan, if you will, whether it's a no interest or a very low interest loan. So, okay. Anybody else comments or questions?
I guess if we're just talking about which ones we approve, I base this as a preliminary, and we can't go above what this would be, but we can go below, and I think last year we ended up reducing a little bit when we did the final. I agree with the use of funds if it's possible to help keep the assessed levy down, but based on what we have in front of us right now, I would go for option 1. I know it's the highest, but I strongly support keeping the road dollars where they are. I do believe in being able to put some money for CIP instead of having certificates all the time and paying interest there. And I do believe that we need to work to have a balanced budget. There's governments we know just don't do it, and sooner or later it comes back to bite you. So while I was here, I would like to work towards a balanced budget and stop using the reserve. And based on even on option 1, I think at the end of this year we're looking at being the reserve down to 40%. Is that correct?
44%.
Which is
44,
the level where we don't want to go below.
Right.
And next year doesn't look any prettier either at this stage. So at this stage, I would support option 1.
Okay. All right. Mr. Molitor?
I basically echo Mr. Chiplin's thoughts.
Okay. Okay.
I also agree with using option 1 as a preliminary. As we've mentioned before, the preliminary cannot go up, however, it can come down, and we've done a good job of really analyzing the budgets before the final is due. I'm very interested in hearing more about our roads and really coming up with a well thought out pavement management plan and working on that plan and working backwards into our budget. So I'm in favor of option 1 and working on whittling away at it before the final one is done.
So good comments, everybody. I think for the preliminary, I think the option 1 is really the only choice since we don't know a number of other issues. One, whether we can without penalty or without liability to the city, can we just take from other funds? I don't know that we can, but certainly we can explore that or find out legally where we stand. I also don't want to put the city at risk should we take money from a certain fund. I don't want to put us at risk for having that challenged by entities that had to pay into that. That might be one thing that we have to look at. The other thing is my understanding with the $50,000 that wasn't that was going to start and kind of be the basis or the first installment, if you will, for trying to levy cash for equipment versus doing equipment certificates, which we've done now for a number of years. With the certificates, as you know, granted low interest rates, but eventually those interest rates are going to go up. So this was starting to build that cash reserve, not using it to pay a debt for tomorrow. It was to build the cash reserve for eventually when the interest rates go up that we would have cash in there to use versus borrowing. Is that a...
Well, yeah, if we have cash in the fund, we can always analyze our fund balance and see how much we need to issue debt. If you have more
Right.
in the fund, you can issue less debt. So I think we're saying it two different ways, but I think we're getting to the same
All right.
point.
All right. Okay. So I think we'll continue to work on it. I think we do have to work towards a balanced budget. And we're not there quite yet. We have been working towards that, but I also think we need to look at the fund balance, which is also very important for our, amongst other things, but it's also important for our rating, which will also give us better interest rates on loans. So with that, any other comments or questions?
Madam Mayor, I do have another comment. I'd like to remind the council that last year, when we reduced the preliminary tax levy down, we didn't cut a penny out of the budget. All we did was we simply debited the general fund reserve, which we can't afford to continue doing. So
Right.
I would suggest in the future, if we do plan to reduce the preliminary tax levy, that we actually cut the budget instead of playing these fiscal tricks.
And I think that's part of it. And I think every council member would have to weigh in terms of what they would like to see cut then. So that would be part of it.
I think it's troubling to hear it said that we reduce the preliminary tax levy all the time when we just continue taking it out of the general fund reserves. And we're not cutting the budget. So I just want to make that clear.
Right. Okay. All right.
And I'd like to add, when that happened last year, I was also agreeing with that we should have let that reduce our reserve level. So I do agree with that.
Okay. All right. So our first order is then, is there a motion to approve the 2020 preliminary tax levy? And if so, is it option 1, 2, or 3?
A motion to approve the levy at option level 1.
Okay. Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Okay. A motion has been made by Mr. Molitor and seconded by Mr. Tschumperlin. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-0. Bruce dissenting. I'm sorry, 4. Thank you. 4-1. Next, we have approve our debt levy at 100% of the 2020 bond payments. Mr. Grimm?
Yep, and Madam Mayor and Council, this is one we've been able to do for quite a while annually here. So we've got a good collection rate on our levies, so the City Council historically has levied for 100% of next year's bond payments. And statutorily, and when I send it down to the county auditor, we have to, municipalities can levy up to 105%, and that's supposed to help protect against delinquencies and stuff. So by doing less than what we can, the amount we can do, we have to adopt this resolution to say we're doing our debt levies at 100% versus the allowable 105%. So and I think I referenced in there, it brings down our levy by about $43,000 by levying at 100% versus at 105 of those principal and interest payments. So.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that would be the resolution to.
And I think you said in your in the packet too that we were pretty good in terms of our fund balances. So.
Yep, in our debt.
But we may have to look at that in future years. But for next year we're fine, and maybe even future years we're still okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments?
We've been doing 100% for how long?
Oh.
Almost
a long time.
A long time. Yeah, I was going to say at least 10 years.
Okay.
That's why it doesn't look like we'd ever have to do 105, but yeah.
Right.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the debt levy at 100% versus 105 of the 2020 bond payments?
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion has been made by Ms. Bruce and seconded by Mr. Molitor to approve the debt levy at 100% of the 2020 bond payments. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. So next is approve the date for our public comments on the 2020 levy and budget. Staff is recommending December 3rd?
December 2nd.
2nd,
Yep,
okay.
Yep. And that would be at 7 o'clock on December 2nd. There's some statutory requirements that it has to be basically, give or take after Thanksgiving, or it's November or whatever, November 25th.
I think it was November 25th.
Yeah.
Can't be before then.
Before that, they want, people, because basically truth and tax, or they used to call it truth and taxation, the preliminary tax statements will go out in November based on all the entities' preliminary levies, so it gives time for those to get out, and then our first meeting after that would be right now our only scheduled meeting for December is December 2nd, so that's why the December 2nd at 7 o'clock would be what we'd set and what would go out in those mail notices as our public comment on the 2020 budget and levies. So.
Okay. So people should get notice in the mail based on the preliminary levy. This is what you could expect to see in taxes, and then that would give them an opportunity to receive that information, and then if they would like to make comments, they could come to the council on December 2nd. Okay. And that's the soonest that they could come. I mean, they could come under persons to be heard, but the public hearing or the public comment period would be December 2nd.
Yeah, which would be basically the same thing. It would just be a designated time for them to talk about it.
Yeah, okay. All right. Any further questions, comments from the council? Otherwise, a motion to approve December 2nd, 7 p.m. for the public comment on the 2020 levy and budget.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Motion by Mr. Tschumperlin and seconded by Ms. Bruce. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. So next item of business is our comprehensive, it's approving the 2040 comprehensive plan. First, I'm going to allow Mr. Abel to say, to start it out, and then Ms. Bruce, you can have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. The 2040 comprehensive plan update was approved by the Metropolitan Council on July 24th of 2019. It is now ready for the City Council's adoption. Once adopted, the City can then proceed with the implementation actions in the plan, including making changes to the official zoning controls, our zoning and subdivision ordinances to ensure consistency with the plan. We have 9 months to make those updates, and we've talked about that here briefly as we've talked about the comp plan from time to time, that we'd have some follow-up work with our zoning maps and subdivision ordinances to bring them into compliance. So pending the action tonight, that would likely take place sometime, I would guess, this winter. As the workload allows us to, we'd bring that through some of that will have to go through the Planning Commission, of course, and eventually we'll get to you as council, just housekeeping items to bring our plan up to date, or our current zoning and subdivision ordinances up to date. Just a note, too, as you'll notice, the actual comprehensive plan was not included in your packet due to its size. We provided a link there to the city's website, so it is on the city's website, the adopted plan by the Met Council, and the link to that was part of your staff report tonight. So action item, we do have a resolution for the council's consideration to adopt the 2040 Minnetrista comprehensive plan update. That's all I have for you this evening.
Okay. Are there any questions of staff? Okay, Ms. Bruce?
Mr. Abel, can you hit that link and bring up the comp plan?
It'll take me a minute.
On the screen, because I'm going to be referencing some page numbers that I'd like. And while you're doing that, I prepared some comments just because this is an important plan, planning out the next 30 years. Or
10,
years,
because then it'll be updated.
And it's important that we get this right. And I want to make sure it's understood that in no way do my remarks reflect negatively on any of the people that worked on this plan. I know the council and the Planning Commission and staff put hundreds of hours into this, if not more. And everyone did the best that they could. And it's a huge document. It's 350-some pages. So I'm not being critical of any of the work that people did, but I have some concerns, and I'd just like to read this, and I'll offer my notes to Ms. Linquist.
That would be helpful.
So you'll have the page numbers I'm referencing and where I'm citing things. So in reviewing the comp plan to see if all the changes had been made since council last reviewed it, I found many of them had not been made, and there are a number of significant errors that need correction. This plan isn't ready to be approved, in my opinion, by any means until the following issues are addressed. On page 346, and is that up yet?
It's thinking.
It's loading. Well, these are all cited, so you can go back and look. And on page 346, under Parks and Open Space, we agreed to take out the recommended 2017 improvements. On that page, there's because they don't belong, and they also create expectations that may or may not be met. The 2017 CIP improvements have no place in the 2040 plan, but they're still there. And those CIP numbers were from 3 years ago, so those need to be taken out. We talked about taking them out, and they're still in there. On page 347, and this is probably the most concerning word in the entire comp plan, but there is an overly broad statement made here that gives the Met Council carte blanche to regulate almost anything they want to in Minnetrista, and the word that they use is may. In the context, the City of Minnetrista will not permit activity that may conflict with the metropolitan system policy plans. That word may tacitly gives the Met Council the right to shut down anything, any activity they think may conflict with their plans. They could essentially make anything illegal. They could make golf carts illegal. They could make cars illegal, for that matter. The bar is set very low. In fact, there's no bar set when you use the word may. I would suggest merely removing the word and changing conflict to conflicts. So it would say that will not permit activity that conflicts instead of may conflict with the metropolitan system policy plans. That would at least make them have to prove that we're doing something that conflicts with their plan, not something that they could fabricate that might conflict with their plan. I think that's an important thing to change. On page 172, historically our data, this is the water plan, historically our data indicates per capita water demand has shown a decreasing trend since 2012. And on page 178, it shows where the gallons per capita per day has declined from 137 to 113 and then to 112. The trend is explained as being the result of more efficient appliances, shower heads, etc., and this trend is expected to continue. So I'm not understanding why, when the latest historical data we have shows the GPCPD, the per capita, at 112, that we're using 134 in our calculations to project future water demand. I haven't seen any factors that indicate that GPCPD is going to increase. We need to calculate future water demand based on reality and not anything else, and I haven't seen any factors indicate that per capita water use is going to increase in the future. On page 182, future water conservation policies. This shows the city making commitments to adopt future ordinances. And I'm sorry, but the city does not have the authority to make a commitment to revise or adopt an ordinance in the future without the ordinance being submitted in writing to the council, which these have not. On page 183, number 7, it says additional strategies to reduce water use and support wellhead protection planning. The city of Minnetrista will adopt a private well ordinance, implement a water conservation outreach program, and implement a rebate program for water efficient appliances and fixtures. All of these are things that we're making commitments to do in the future, and we're making commitments to pass ordinances to do these things when this isn't something that we can make a commitment to without discussing it as a council and knowing what these ordinances are going to say. Managing a rebate program is something the utility companies do because they have the staff and accounting systems to do that. That's not something our city needs to be involved in. Regarding private wells in that paragraph, pages 183 and 227, this language shows the city intends to adopt a private well ordinance imposing the same watering restrictions on private wells as on those on the public water supply. This is not only unnecessary, it is unenforceable. Most properties on private wells are already financially incentivized to conserve water. They have water treatment systems that are expensive to operate with iron filters that require bleach and water softeners that require salt. These systems are not cheap to operate. There is no reason to regulate these properties with burdensome restrictions when it's unnecessary and it would be impossible to enforce anyway. I thought we discussed this in our first go-around. We could fix all this by saying we would consider this, but as it's written, it says that we will adopt, not consider adopting, as I remember discussing this as a council. We can always consider anything without making a commitment to do it. Green Step Cities on page 182 and 227. I wasn't even aware of the Green Step Cities program when this council reviewed the comp plan in 2017. Recently, we've all become aware of a significant amount of controversy over this program. Cities such as Plymouth decided not to enroll on the night they had this program on the consent agenda and heard all the objections regarding it raised. The recent news coverage of this program indicates serious concerns over its encroachment on local government autonomy. By checking the box on page 227, the city is making a commitment of implementation of at least one of Green Step City's best practices for water. We all want to do what's right for the environment. But we don't even know what these best practices are. As a council, I don't think there's a single council member that can tell me what these practices are. They haven't been submitted to the council, and it would be irresponsible, to say the least, to commit to implementing something we haven't even seen. Page 358, implementation actions with our water supply. This chart shows the city is planning to install a 750,000-gallon elevated storage tank in the short term. The actual size of the tank we are planning to install, as many of you are aware, is 500,000 gallons, not 750,000 gallons. This needs to be corrected in the plan. I'm not ready to approve this plan this evening because of the many issues mentioned. I suggest staff and council review the plan thoroughly to address these issues before voting on its approval. I understand we have until the end of December, which I believe should allow that to occur.
So a couple comments, Ms. Bruce. You said we should be discussing this as a council. I do believe we've had the comp plan on our agenda numerous times, and it really would have been good to have brought all this up at that time. Now, you said
we
haven't
bring many of these things up, and they weren't changed.
I've got the floor. Thank you. So, first of all, I just really feel that a lot of these things have been there since the get-go, and we haven't touched on them or talked about them as a council. And honestly, I think we should have been talking about them way back when, because this was in the we approved the draft plan, I think back in April, with all of these things in there, and that was approved. And we should have then that's when you should have brought this forward, all these things, because it didn't change.
Madam Mayor,
can I finish? I get to
you're telling me that I'm bringing up things that that we haven't discussed, and we have discussed many of the things that I just stated.
What would you like? What is your recommendation then?
My recommendation is not to approve the comp plan tonight, to address the issues and I'll give this to the city clerk and Mr. Abel, and we can look up these sightings and correct these.
Let's hold on just a second. Mr. Abel, can I ask you? So Ms. Bruce references the water tower being 500 gallons, not 750, and in the comp plan it says 750. Is that, what does that do? I mean, is that a big change?
I don't believe so, Madam Mayor.
Okay, I mean, is there, are we held to putting in a 750-gallon water tank if it says 750?
I don't believe so.
Okay. And then the Green Step Cities, it says in the comp plan that we can implement one of these practices. So we don't even have to be a member of the Green Step Cities to implement a practice that they might be recommending, which is a number of, they have a whole series of events, or whole series or lists that we could do if we wanted to.
Yeah, again, I mean, in terms of what they can, make you do, there's guiding principles to work off of. I'm sure there's a lot of things in the current plan that are in there that obviously we haven't done. We talked a lot great length about tech, its instrument financing, and those sorts of things. So again, it's a direction of the council and how they want to proceed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
One of my biggest concerns is the private wells, and we did discuss this. And my understanding was that
I don't remember discussing that. When did we discuss that? Do you know?
It was in the spring of 2017. I had just come on council, and I had just thoroughly read the comp plan, all 300 and some pages of it, and I remember discussing private wells and whether or not it was something that we wanted to to choose on that chart. And I'd have to go back and look in the minutes to see what the decision was, but most of the things that I've referenced here are simple changes to make. And removing the word may is a simple change to make. Saying that we'd consider adopting something.
Well, that's not a bad.
We'll adopt something.
Okay, but here, let's. Granted, but let me ask Mr. Biggerstaff, as an attorney, if something says may conflict with a council's, I think. How does that? And what if it says if it conflicts? What is our legal status then? I mean, does that give more weight legally?
Madam Mayor and members of the council, I would have to review the language in more context to be able to offer an opinion about this specific instance. I think there is certainly a difference between may and shall in a legal usage. The more general comment I guess I can offer is that the comprehensive plan is really a guiding document. I don't know, and again, not having reviewed that specific language in any detail, that one word versus the other word or wording would give the Metropolitan Council any authority to require the city to do anything to stop the city from doing something. I mean, I think those are all bigger and more generalized questions, but it's something that we could look at if it was the desire of the council.
Just if may, Madam Mayor and Council, real quickly. I mean, I know like specifically the well and the future ordinances. I mean, that was specific. I mean, what we have to do is follow their system statements, their Thrive 2040 plan. That's what the whole process that we went through to update our plan. I mean, that was one specifically called out in their system statements about the wells and the private wells and having a use restriction type ordinance put in place. So that there again, I mean, the plan that's before you is what's been approved by the Met Council. It conforms with their system statements. So again, I guess it's the direction of you as a city council about how much more discussion you want to have with the Metropolitan Council on bending with their system statements.
So what you're saying is that their systems are there, so they have this whole requirement that each city has to meet.
Every city, it's the same system statements for every city. Right. It gets a little bit specific with some of their numbers. Right. They'll break out into categories.
I mean, I'm just making an assumption that maybe they're saying that it has to be a citywide watering restrictions. That means you can, depending on what part of the city you're in, you can water on even days, and on the other areas, then you can water on odd days. It's that even odd watering restriction. And usually it's just during the summer months. I believe it's like June, July, August, something like that. So they're probably looking at it. Most cities, or a lot of cities within their jurisdiction are fully developed. So they are looking at it in terms of a citywide ordinance versus just a compartmentalized ordinance. The other question is, how do we enforce that if we don't? I mean, we'd have to go around and know, or whoever would be enforcing it, if we enforce it, would have to know which homes are on private wells and which homes are on city water. We may not even know that. I mean, we would know who is and who isn't, but I'm just saying I'm not sure that whoever would notice somebody watering, if they would have to know whether they're on private wells or city wells.
Not really. I mean, if your ordinance said no watering on even day or even side, whatever,
right,
it doesn't matter.
That's what I'm getting at.
It doesn't matter if you're on the city, or private.
Right, but what
the person would need to know that.
But I'm saying if it is only restricted to city water, if you're on city water, then the person would have to know that.
Currently, the ordinances are written for city water.
Correct.
So I'm not sure what the issue is.
The new, what Ms. Bruce is referring to is the Met Council is saying you have to have it citywide.
I get that.
Okay.
Actually, they're actually not saying that. This is saying that Minnetrista will adopt a private well ordinance making the watering restrictions apply to private wells.
Right.
Meaning that it would be then citywide. Yeah. The water restrictions would be
assumption is
citywide.
that
Okay.
The ordinance that you have for currently the city water is restricted to our restriction policy.
Correct.
Basically, what they're saying is that would have to apply to everyone, not just those in city water.
Correct.
Given that's the case, you don't need to know who's on private, who's on city.
That would be the case, correct.
So that part is kind of a non-starter. I mean, it doesn't matter. The city doesn't need to know that. If you pass an ordinance that says, watering on even sides of the streets on even number of days, that's that.
But Ms. Bruce is saying that she doesn't want that.
No, I get that, but I don't think you'd have to know, per se, who's on, the way they have it written, you don't have to know who's on the city and who's not.
I think we're arguing a moot point.
Right, I agree. Let's move on.
Okay. All right.
What's the ramifications of making these changes? It has to go back to the council. It gets churned around there, and then they say yay, nay. I mean, what if they come back and say, no, these are our guiding principles, and that's what our jurisdiction says you will abide by?
Yep.
I don't think the Met Council has the authority to dictate to a city that we have to pass a certain ordinance that says something that we haven't even written yet. So it's a legal question. It's a constitutional question. We have a Met Council that's overreaching and telling Minnetrista what ordinances we need to pass and rules that we need to apply that don't have anything to do with water and sewer or infrastructure or anything that the Met Council has authority to regulate. So, and don't even get me started on the housing stuff. We'll spare you that tonight. But they don't have the authority to demand that Minnetrista pass ordinances that haven't been written yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I share your concerns. But if you really want to pick this battle, we better go back to the budget discussion, because we're going to have to raise the levy about 20% and put all the legal fees to fight this. Because, I mean, because like you said, it's a legal question. And, I'm not opposed to some of what you're saying here, but I really think we've got to pick the battles we can actually win. Because if you want to pick them all, it's going to be really expensive, and I don't think we're going to win. You can reference Lake Elmo.
And I don't want to pick a legal battle. I think it's worth it to revise the comp plan, send it back to the Met Council, and they may say fine. They may see these as insignificant changes.
Well, I think you're correct. I think some of them are insignificant changes. For instance, but I'm kind of wondering, for instance, you reference page 346, the 2017 park improvements. I don't think the Met Council really cares what's there or how much we're thinking it might cost. They just want to see that there's some park improvements. Mr. Abel, is that? I mean, they don't really care if we have the park improvements from 2017 or and that's when it was started. That's why that's in there. And because we've been working on this for 2 years, it's really hard to go back and continually plug in new numbers. I think they just want to know that we have a park plan, we have a CIP plan for our parks, and that's that we have a plan. Is that maybe a correct?
Madam Mayor, we can sit here and speculate all evening. I mean, you've hit on the main points. There's the philosophical, how much do you want to fight? This is the plan that's been approved. Eric Weber went through this whole process, we did a lot of negotiating on all those things that have been talked about and topics. It's the council's decision. Do you want to approve this plan, or do you want to have more back and forth?
Well, and we can also have more back and forth with the Met Council if and when it comes to certain items in the comp plan, and that's when we can decide, do we want to have that particular battle. So, Mr. Biggerstaff, maybe you could kind of, if can you elaborate over the Met Council's jurisdiction? I think we all agree we don't really, I think any city municipality really doesn't like a lot of the things that are required by the Met Council, but what is their jurisdiction and what is our obligation?
Yeah, I think certainly working with local governments, I think that's a generally shared feeling that there's plenty of folks that have taken the opinion that the Met Council has a pretty specific set of guiding principles and powers, and some of the things they do are maybe outside of that. I think to Mrs. Bruce's point, there are some constitutional questions there. There are legal questions. There are political questions for others to determine. The Met Council derives its authority from the state legislature, just the same way that the city derives its authority from the state legislature. The legislature has designed the Metropolitan Council as an organization. They've given it certain authorities. I can't speak to the specifics of, whether the language in the comp plan about water towers is in or out of their authority. I tend to think that it's probably one of those details that's just a detail. If it's wrong, it's wrong, and they probably wouldn't bat an eye at it being changed. But it gets back to some extent to the question of if something may conflict with the council's directives, or if it does. I mean, there's always a question there, regardless of the language you use. The Met Council can always determine or argue that something violates its guiding principles or its statutory authorities and things like that. So,
whether it says may or doesn't say may.
Yeah, and they as an organization would have to make the same calculations that this council would have to make about how far they wanted to push that, how much effort and time they wanted to put into that. So, it's a balancing act, I think,
right.
and there are specific questions that have been raised for a number of years now about comprehensive planning and things like that that are perennial topics at the legislature and elsewhere. So I don't think these questions are going to be solved here tonight or even in the near future. I think they're bigger questions that are going to take more of a regional approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anybody else have comments? I think Mr. Molitor said it fairly succinctly. Pick your battles, and how much do you want to spend on it? I don't think we all disagree with what you're saying, Ms. Bruce.
And I don't know if I counted off here 7, 8 things I think you mentioned. I'm not sure exactly how
There's 7.
7.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them I see as more possible. I mean, obviously the corrections on the water tower, it should be pretty straightforward. The water plan, the numbers used. The May versus that, I'm sure is going to be a fight. I just don't see us winning that one. The rebate system, I'm concerned about that as well. I mean, I don't want to implement the rebate system. But again,
how would they force us to do that?
That's
See,
exactly
that's the thing. That's I think what Mr. Biggerstaff is saying. They're going to have to determine whether that's a battle they want to fight.
Yeah, we're kind of, in this case, when it comes to ordinances, we're on the shoes of the other foot.
Right.
We're now the recipient of their ordinance, if you will.
Right.
And that's going to be kind of well, you're going to have to make us, and you're going to have to, I think that's a tougher battle.
Oh, but there are consequences 10 years from now when we do the next comp plan. They're going to come back and say, well, you committed to do this, this, and this, and you didn't do it. And there will be consequences for that. And we all know that the Met Council imposes consequences on cities. And whether it's reimbursing you for the development of your comp plan or your water and sewer rates or whatever it is, there will be consequences in the future for not keeping the commitments that we're making in the comp plan.
Just to use the same thing, there may be consequences. I mean, I don't say that lightly. What I mean by that is if the legislature gets those senses and puts a restriction on the Met Council, there may not be consequences. That's, as was pointed out, that was where the battle needs to be fought. But I mean, I am being serious that if there's some reins put on the Met Council by the legislature, there may not be all these consequences that are there. But I mean, I think there are some valid points, but I don't think I'd have an appetite to fight all of them. I think we'd have to pick
I tend to agree. Yeah.
And I don't know if you get a prioritization.
Maybe we can bring this to a work session and prioritize them, or pick the ones that we want to have changed, and I'm one member of the council, and we all have a voice in this, so it's a majority has to agree on it.
So I would like to say I am not a fan of Met-Council. And I do think they overreach. And I am, and some of your comments are valid. So David, do you have time to just take these points and just look to see if this is something we could look at just in making minor tweaks? If not, I agree. I don't think it is wise for the city to go into legal battle if we know right now that this is something we want win, and it is a bigger than us thing. Would you have time to kind of look at these points and say it's possible that we could make these changes now before the final?
Well, I'm not an attorney, so that's the first thing about you're asking legal questions here in some sense in regard there. And so, it's a question back to, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board on a lot of these things and take it back through. They have subcommittees that these have to go through the Metropolitan Council. So ultimately, I don't have a dollar amount I can throw at you right now tonight, but it is going to cost money to go back and revisit some of this stuff and take it back through the process. Time is money, and that's what it boils down to.
And it's not my desire to incur legal costs to do this. Most of these changes aren't legal changes, and I don't see them bringing any legal ramifications whatsoever. They're to me, they seem like tweaks that we can make that the Met Council will probably sign off on. And in fact, I would assume that they'll probably say taking out the word may is fine. So I'm not sure. I disagree that it's going to be expensive. These aren't extensive changes to make. These are.
I think you're correct. Some of them aren't, and they may very well be. The question that we would have to have answered is, in order to make any changes, be they small or large, what is the process that this would have to go through? That would be the question. Do we have to go through more public hearings then? Do we have to go, how does this, so this has to be approved by the end of December, and then we have to start working on implementing the zoning and all of that. Does that have to be done by the end of December?
You have 9 months.
9 months, okay. So it has to be approved by the city by the end of December, and there may be consequences if that doesn't happen. And so the question is, right now, they are probably teed up with all of the review of all of the cities that they have to review their comp plans for, because it's getting down to the wire. So could we even get in the queue for that? And then are these, again, some of these are minor wordsmithing things. Do they even want to look at it for that? Because some of these things, like the water tower, for instance, I'm just using that as a for instance, isn't really worth even talking about. I mean, it doesn't matter if it says 500 or 750. They're not going to make us build a 750 water tower.
Realize that.
The other thing is, are they going to back down on us having to implement a citywide watering restriction during summer months? Are they going to back off of that? Probably not. Probably not. So
they might.
Well, maybe, but so the only thing is, I don't see them backing off on it if it fits in with their system statements, and every city is required to do this. That's the only thing. So, do you want to bring it back, or do you want to pass it? And what's your?
I'd say take a vote on passing it and see what the feel is.
Okay.
Well, you didn't get your question answered, though.
And that was what?
Your question was, what's the process? I haven't heard what the response is.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I heard the whole thing about Met Council probably has a bunch in their queue. That's their problem, not ours. We were one of the first cities to get that plan out there, And quite frankly, they, I don't want to say they sat on it, but because I know David's put a lot of work into it, but it's been out there for a couple of years now. The fact that we're now 4 months away from their deadline, I look at, hey, they're more culpable in any deadline crunch than we are. We were very good participants in getting this done early. So I guess
well, we approved the final draft plan in April, was it? I think April. So
yeah, but that was after staff had done a lot of work.
Oh, sure.
So I guess I don't want to just say, well, they're really busy, we can't bug them. That's not a valid excuse. But I do want to know if we chose to, whether we pick one of these things or we pick them all, or what something in between. What would be the process? David, can you elaborate on that?
I can't answer that question, Ms. Molitor, because it's going to depend upon the severity of the issue and what committee it has to go through, and whether it can administratively be approved by their staff or whether it's got to go back to their full Met Council board for review. There's different thresholds.
So let's say there was a desire to change something. Do you present it back to them with the change then, or what does that?
Yeah, we'd have to, with whatever changes, we'd have to bring that back to their attention and then wait for their response. Essentially, work with Eric again, and that's where again there's going to be some. That's not only from a legal, but there will be some money there involved with that, of course, as he's been the primary negotiator on a lot of this stuff and working with it. So
that's where the cost is coming.
Yeah.
Okay.
And potentially legal, depending.
Right.
Well, then let me suggest this. The first order would be maybe then to bring it back to council and discuss a little more in depth these 7 items that Ms. Bruce brought up, because I don't even know that we're all in agreement on all 7 items or any of the items. And unfortunately, we weren't aware of this prior to tonight, and to make a decision on those, I think, would be would be asking a lot, since we'd all want to be able to digest it and to also do some research on our own. So at this point, I don't think it's worth investing more money until we've talked about this and to see where we want to go with it as a council. That's my opinion.
So, and I would like to, I agree with you on that, Lisa, have David connect with Eric at WSD and ask these points. Is this even something we have a chance of getting approved? If he says no way.
Well, I talked to Eric today. I didn't have the list to go over, but again, there's been a constant negotiation. The water one specifically is in their system statements. I read it today. It's in there. I don't know how you're going to get them not to.
Well, and that's what I'd like to know. At that
prove that
it's not going to pass no matter what we do.
In large, again, back to these other ones. this is in their system statements. So
I guess
that 750 to 500. Yeah, they don't care. There's some small things like that, and we're
right, and we're not going to make changes for that. That's kind of ridiculous, but I think we could. I guess we'd have to invest some money in, hopefully a small amount, to find out from Eric what's negotiable and what's not. Is that something the council wants to do?
Well, I think it goes back to your question before about we should probably talk as a council, if we're going to look at this specific list of 7, before I ask Eric, or we ask Eric to investigate all 7, we might want to have a discussion first to say, as a council, we think we should look at these 3, so that we're limiting the scope of what we're asking Eric and therefore keeping our costs down.
So then that brings us back to what I said earlier, that we'd have to bring this back to a council discussion, preferably a work session, to say, okay, are any of these or all of these, or
right,
which ones are we going to then take to Eric and say, can we? So what this will do is this will probably postpone this approval sometime in October. Because if we go to the work session, next work session, then bring it back, and then have to go to Eric and find out, okay, potentially what is, if anything, then it won't come back until October.
Next work session is the public hearing.
Correct.
So there you go.
So
So
we're in
now
October.
we're into the end of October.
That's fine. That's not good till December.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay? All right, so we'll bring this back to the work session. It would be the first work session in October for discussion of the items on this list. All right. Moving on to a preliminary plat at 7155 County Road 26. Mr. Abel.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the applicants have submitted a preliminary plat application for a two-lot subdivision at 7155 County Road 26. The property is currently zoned agricultural. As you recall, the minimum lot size in those districts are 10 acres in size. The council may recall that back in 2017, the applicant did approach the neighboring property owner of 630 Game Farm Road North about purchasing a few additional acres with the intention of this future subdivision of the lot. The council did a simple subdivision back in 2017 for that process. That has since been completed, and the resulting parcel now is part of this proposed preliminary plat that is before you this evening. So it is a two-lot subdivision, as you can see from the screen. The property has an existing driveway off County Road 26, and that's actually probably the biggest point of discussion as part of this proposed subdivision. There is not a great secondary access point. Ideally, we don't want to promote a shared type driveway system, but given that it is a corner lot, it is on County Road 26 with an existing driveway there. The county certainly is not interested in allowing for another access point off of County Road 26. As the council is well aware, Game Farm Road in that area has some extreme topography and some trees as well, so it makes it very difficult to provide for another access point there. So in this case, a shared driveway does seem to make the most sense for this proposed plat as being presented. So if the preliminary plat is approved, a condition of that is that a shared driveway maintenance agreement be submitted to the city, and then if it does move forward to final plat, that would get recorded to both the titles of the properties moving forward, so that there was an understanding of that shared driveway off of County Road 26. Other than that, it is relatively straightforward. They do meet the minimum lot sizes. They showed proposed house pads meeting the setback requirements. There is one thing, as mentioned in your staff report, this is right on the boundary of the Pioneer Sarah Creek Watershed District and the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, so that makes it a little bit interesting in that sense, but we have talked to both watershed districts. They're not interested in moving those boundaries to conform with the property lines, so we'll come up with a lot combination agreement which will satisfy that aspect of the proposal. Both agencies are comfortable with that, and so that's how that would move forward if this does move forward to final plat approval. So with that, we do have a resolution in your packet which approves the preliminary plat at 7155 County Road 26.
Right. Council, questions, comments?
What's the guidelines? I see that one of the requirements is either construct the emergency warning siren or pay a city fee.
I think they'll pay the city fee. It's a little
suspect
cheaper.
that, but I was just curious. There's one just down the road, so I didn't know what drives that they have to, in theory, would have to build a siren.
Well, we would look to see if there was the need for a warning siren in this area. Obviously, as you said, there's not. And so similar, as we talked earlier in the budget process with some of their other funds, at the time of subdivision, we look for those types of fees to be collected. Park dedication is another one that's called out in here. We also have a siren fee, which goes to that fund then to help for future maintenance and improvements to our existing warning sirens.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd just like to comment that I did attend the planning committee, and this was one of the conversations on the agenda. They did vote 7-0, but the shared driveway was something we did bring up, but they felt comfortable because it was the same owner. So I just wanted to throw that.
Well, it would be two owners in the future.
It
Yeah,
could be,
yeah.
but for right now.
Yeah,
Well,
but
the
it
idea
will be.
is you subdivide it so you can sell
That's
it.
true.
So I don't think that's a valid argument.
Well,
Well,
Yeah.
if that were to happen,
Yeah.
that would be a discussion at that time.
well, I think it needs to be part of the preliminary.
No, there wouldn't be a discussion.
Yeah, it needs to be part of the preliminary
Right.
plat that they have to have that in place because
Absolutely.
otherwise it will come back to bite the city.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, again, we don't like shared driveways, but there are instances where you have to have it. So, and I would want to make sure that the shared driveway agreement is very specific and how that works and all of that. So,
Those get reviewed by the city attorney,
yeah,
Madam Mayor and
yeah,
Council.
okay. You're right. Shared driveways are not greatly appreciated, but okay. My only comment, and maybe a slight concern, but I understand. So I know back several years ago they purchased that box, if you will. My concern is that future owners may not know or see or these lot lines. Are they going to put markers on those corners so that it's clear as to where the lot line is?
Well, that would be done at the time of subdivision, but there's no guarantee that those are going to continue to stay there until some future owner were to purchase those.
Okay.
And that box, if you will, was created prior to this.
Yes.
Right? So we crossed that bridge already.
Right. It's just now I thought because maybe it wasn't addressed back then, maybe now it would be a good idea to just address it. But if we can't,
Well, we can ask them to put the stakes in the ground, but how are we going to guarentee that they're
That
not
they're
going to
gonna
get pulled
stay.
out of the ground?
sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, I think
Right.
the bigger issue is at some point, the other owners, person to the, assuming south here, yes, south, would want to buy the box back, if you will.
Well, they can't
They
because
can't,
that would
because
render
it-
the
because
one
it would
lot
make the other lot.
less than 10 acres, right? That's why they bought it, I think, in the
Well, I
first
get it,
place. Yeah.
but Different owners, different
Right.
understanding.
Okay.
But that's already been addressed in the previous
Okay.
subdivision.
Okay. Pretty straightforward. 2 10-acre lots. I know the county was asking for the 50-foot right-of-way. Does that reduce the lot size? I mean, and then are
Yes.
they still conforming?
Yep, still conforming. Yep.
Okay. So it'll be 10 acres.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, is there then a motion to approve the preliminary plat at 7155 County Road 26?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion has been made by Ms. Bruce and seconded by Ms. Mortenson to approve the preliminary plat, 7155 County Road 26. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. So next we're going to move on to approval of plans and plans and specifications to authorize requests for quotes for the Kings Point Road Water Main and Street Repair Project.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council.
Why is
Consistent
he
with
dry?
past discussions with the council before you this evening for your consideration and request for approval is to proceed to request quotes from contractors for the Kings Point Road water main repair and associated streets repair along with the water main repair. We are proposing to get, if approved this evening, to get this information out to contractors as soon as possible and back to the council for consideration at the second meeting in September so that we can provide the low quote an opportunity to complete the work prior to the end of October. That's typically when we start seeing the end of construction season. That being said, it's a larger window of opportunity for a contractor to complete the work. However, the contract documents do indicate that once work has commenced, that they would have 3 weeks to complete the work. The estimated cost for these repairs is currently at $65,000 with including contingencies. We did add some, we had some additional contingency in there, as we've discussed in the past, just in the event that there's some additional replacement that's necessary beyond what we've identified in the plans. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions that the council may have at this time.
Any questions, council?
I note they say reinstall similar. Is the only thing that will be different is the insulation?
Due to, that's an excellent question, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Tschumperlin. We are proposing instead of the plastic pipe material that's currently in place is a ductile iron. Because of its strength in this situation, we wouldn't see any bending. So we, upon recommendation with after consulting with a water engineer, we did propose the ductile iron in there in that event, and then we did include 8 inches of insulation underneath that water main.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve the plans and specifications and authorize requests for quotes for the Kings Point Road water main and street repair?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any other questions? The motion has been made by Mr. Tschumperlin and seconded by Mr. Molitor. So all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. What I'm going to ask the council is, I was wondering, we have people here for number H, which is the Hickory Drive and Rainbow Road for Don Benson. I'd like to move that up, and then we can take, because these individuals are here waiting, if we could move that up into our next item, and then we can go back to the previous 2 items. So with that, I apologize. I didn't realize it was, or didn't look that it was so low on the agenda. So with that, Mr. Abel, Hickory Drive and 1370 Rainbow Road for Mr. Benson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. An application has been submitted for a comprehensive plan amendment and a rezone of the property at 1300 Hickory Drive and 1370 Rainbow Road. The amendment is to change the future land use designation from permanent agricultural to rural, and that would also include a rezone request from agricultural preserve to agricultural. The process changes the density from 1 unit per 40 acres to 1 unit per 10 acres. You'll notice on the screen there's a small triangular piece that is roughly 4 acres in size that is zoned and guided at the 1 unit per 40 acres, so that lot does not meet the current requirements. This is because of an action back in 2002. The city allowed the applicants to build a home there so long as another parcel of land that they owned was placed in an agricultural easement. The property that has that easement is 40 acres in size at 1200 Rainbow Road, and as you'll see on your agenda, that's another agenda item that we're discussing tonight with the concept plan review request. So that's that piece of property that was tied to that request. So the action before you for this particular item would be a resolution which approves that a comprehensive plan amendment and rezone request for 1370 Rainbow Drive and 1300 Hickory Drive. There is another simple subdivision request right after that. And I will note, based on your previous decision with the comprehensive plan, that was why we've been holding off on bringing this item to you as council, because we can't make any comprehensive plan amendments until the Met Council's already technically approved it, but you did not approve the comp plan tonight, so that will have to wait for this to actually go through. You could go ahead and approve it, but again, it can't be official until which time we've officially adopted the comprehensive plan. So I just want to make that note that is one change that has occurred. So there is a resolution in your packet for this specific request. I don't know if you want me to go through the simple subdivision item that's kind of related to this item right now.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the screen, a follow-up to this request is a simple subdivision which would rearrange the property lines on the 2 properties as we're talking about. that little 4-acre piece now becomes a 10-acre piece of property, which then would conform with that agricultural zoning district requirement, and that's what the simple subdivision action does. So with the comprehensive plan and rezone, along comes the simple subdivision, which brings them now then into conformance with that 1 unit per 10 acres in the agricultural zoning district. That is the proposed subdivision that or simple subdivision that they're looking to do with the lot line rearrangement. They're not creating any new additional buildable lots, so it does not require a plat. It's just it's a simple subdivision by realigning the existing property lines on the
And there's
property.
no utility easements or drainage
Correct.
easements either. So.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So the new lot would have actually Rainbow Road going through it.
Correct.
And there would be an easement recorded against both, on that property.
For the road? That's platted right of way. So yeah.
Okay,
yes,
so it
essentially,
wouldn't
yes.
matter.
Yes.
Okay, all
Yep.
right. All right. Any questions?
So, just for my clarification, is an outlot defined as a piece of property that's within another piece of property but separated by a public right of way? Is that the definition?
Well,
Most loose in layman's terms.
Well, an outlot's technically, today technically it's a separate parcel, but because of that agreement with that easement, it was essentially tied together. In this case, they did it a little, uniquely, you could say, back in 2002. So they were tied together, and this is, untying that.
So does this outlot remain? Does that still be considered an outlot in the new configuration?
No, it will be a new PID.
Okay, so it will no longer be outlot.
Right.
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
got it. All right.
So there's a number of different actions. So this, this one is the simple subdivision separate from the next item that we're going to be looking at.
And just for clarification, Madam Mayor and Council, these are the only two items that actually require approval, if you will, from the council. The next item is a concept sketch plan,
right.
review. So just for clarification.
And we need to do the, approve the comprehensive plan amendment for 1300 Hickory, which is this one.
Correct.
And we need to do the rezoning for this one. And that won't take effect until after we've approved the new 2040 comprehensive plan. So, all right. So I just want to make those steps clear. So any questions? It will kind of clean up this outlot issue here and create the 10-acre lot, which obviously for this zoning district makes more sense. So, all right, then do I have a motion to approve a comprehensive plan amendment for 1300 Hickory Drive? Well, and Rainbow, would Rainbow have to be, they have to be, and the 1370 Rainbow Road. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. My only question now, again, it's okay to do this plan amendment, okay, and then to rezone both these 1300 as well as 458. But then, if we rezone it and the subdivision doesn't occur, let's just say, the applicant can't go back to ag preserve.
Well, not with the lot lines as proposed, no.
Okay.
Correct.
So I just want to make that clear that it's kind of like you can have this or you can have that, not both. So, all right. All right. Any further questions? Hearing then, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. And then we have ordinance number 458 to rezoning of 1300 Hickory Drive and 1370 Rainbow Road from ag preserve to ag agricultural. Okay. Any questions on that? And this is an actual ordinance, so it's not a public hearing though. So
Nope.
Okay.
The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing
For the ordinance itself. So okay. Any questions? Then hearing none, is there a motion? I need a motion.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Bruce made the motion and Mr. Tschumperlin seconded, approving ordinance number 458 to rezone, which is the rezone of 1300 Hickory Drive and 1370 Rainbow Road from Ag Preserve to Ag. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. And the next one is we know this, authorizing publication of ordinance 458 by title and summary only. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made by Mr. Molitor and seconded by Ms. Bruce. Any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. So the next one, there may be some comments from the public. So first, I'll have you give a background.
Sure.
Thank you.
This is the piece of property, Madam Mayor and Council, that had that agricultural easement placed over the top. What they've submitted to you for review is a sketch plan, concept review. As the council may recall, this is the initial presentation of the applicant's intentions and serves as the basis for conceptual discussion between the city and the applicant. The purpose is to get feedback from staff, the Park Commission, the Planning Commission, and City Council. It gives an opportunity to guide the applicant as to what is generally going to be expected from the city and to alert the applicant of potential problems or future issues with the proposal if they were to move forward with a preliminary plat application. So with that, you can see the proposed concept on your screen. They're looking at a 3-lot proposed subdivision. It would, of course, require a comprehensive plan amendment along with a rezone. The property is located east of County Road 92, so that is allowed per our zoning ordinances for that request. So that would make it, instead of a 1 per 40 units, it would go down to the 1 per 10 units per acre. Each of the 3 lots do meet the 10-acre lot minimum standard as they're being proposed. The biggest thing with the lot configuration, they do meet all the lot width, depth standards with that. But the one thing as proposed, they do not, all 3 lots do not have the required frontage on a public road. As you can see, these are just shared driveways, essentially, that are going to be serving them. The one lot does have the cul-de-sac off of Rainbow Road, but the others technically do not have frontage on a public street as being proposed. So if they were to move forward with this concept, that would be the one and only variance that would be needed, would be that lot frontage on a public road, but otherwise the lots meet all of the minimum requirements and standards as such. The other item I'll jump to, the Planning Commission did discuss this at their August 26th meeting. There was a lot of talk about the long driveway on Parcel C, and if there was a way to make that driveway any shorter. It's my understanding that's something that certainly could be looked at. But what we don't have a maximum driveway length, if you will. What we look at when a building permit comes in is that it conforms with the required setbacks. So again, that's just something that was, I think, discussed at the Planning Commission and something the council may want to weigh in on. Specifically, the recommendation from the Planning Commission was that there be one driveway off Parcel A off of Rainbow, the cul-de-sac. They're looking for a shared driveway for Parcel B and C off of Preserve Drive and not to have 2 separate access points. One of the discussion points was whether or not to extend the Preserve Boulevard cul-de-sac. Currently, as it's platted right now, that whole bubble of the cul-de-sac is not completely within road right-of-way. So it was brought up if you were to ask for that to be extended, now would be the time to basically extend the cul-de-sac up into this property and put it all within city right-of-way. There did not seem to be an appetite from the Planning Commission to do something like that. Another thing that was brought up in your staff report was whether or not Rainbow and Preserve streets should be connected at this point in time. Given the number of units there, it doesn't seem like a very likely scenario. It's probably going to cut into quite a bit of the land, and the curves there too aren't ideal in terms of trying to connect those roads. So I think that was something that was discussed as well with the Planning Commission, but not something that they were looking to make a recommendation with. The Planning Commission was comfortable with the required variance and seemed favorable to the layout as presented. And again, the last bullet number 5, if you will, that the Planning Commission called out was to explore an alternative house design for Parcel C. The long length of that driveway was what was being discussed with that discussion there. So with that, like I said, this is an opportunity for you as a council to discuss those various items and any other you find relevant to help guide the applicant if they were to go ahead and move forward with a preliminary plat application and what you'd be looking for as part of that submittal.
Okay. Madam Mayor, members of the council, we missed item 6I, which pertains to the previous item. It's the simple subdivision portion of it that wasn't voted on.
I'm sorry,
H I 6I.
H has 3 parts.
H had 3 parts.
And then there's I.
And then there's number I, which is the simple subdivision itself.
Mm-hmm.
And we're discussing J now.
And now we're discussing J.
Oh, okay. Well, let's. Yeah. Okay. Let's finish the sketch plan and then we'll move back. Well, simple subdivision. Okay. We've talked about that. So, okay. Is there a motion then to approve the simple subdivision between 13 Hickory Drive and 1370 Rainbow Road? It's that 4 acres that goes now to 10.
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Ms. Bruce made that motion and Mr. Tschumperlin seconded that. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. I'm sorry. I thought we did that. So, all right. Back to sketch plat. All right. So there are some people here. So let's see. I'll take it first. Mr. Benson, he's the applicant. If you'd like to come forward, state your name and so on, speak into the microphone, and then make comments, whatever.
Mayor and City Councilman, my name is Donald Benson. I live at 1300 Hickory Drive, and the summary was perfect from the Planning Commission. That's exactly what I want to do. I can also specify that if the long driveway is a problem, there's plenty of high ground south where a house could be put that would shorten the driveway by a bunch. And one driveway, for about 20 feet, and then a shared driveway splitting to tracks 3 or track 2 and track, I think it's B and C, can split and take care of the cul-de-sac. I don't understand exactly what happened there. It stopped way short of my property. Normally, they try to make a cul-de-sac move into to cover the adjoining properties also, but it didn't happen, and I wasn't aware that I wasn't going to go into that area. I don't want to put a cul-de-sac in there. I think some of the neighbors don't want to extend the cul-de-sac. So a shared driveway makes the most sense.
Mr. Benson, okay, is there access?
What's that?
There's access onto
Preserve Boulevard? I was going to bring up an aerial, Madam Mayor and Council, so you can hopefully see what we're talking about there.
The last thing we'd want is for these driveways to traverse somebody's property.
So you can see the bubble is not necessarily...
Oh, I see. It doesn't go all the way to his property. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
But there is, you can see there's platted right-of-way here within it. And also, the bubble itself
Okay.
Apparently, I guess I don't know the history either. It's before my time what the intent was with the end of Preserve Boulevard and why. Generally, you'll do that when you think it's going to be a temporary cul-de-sac, that for some reason that's going to go away in the future.
This road right here that comes off, that's just a farm road.
That's a farm road right now. Okay.
Not paved or repaired.
Okay.
No gravel, it's just a dirt farm road.
Okay. All right.
So on that, the end of that dirt farm road, is that the property line then?
What's that?
Is that the property line?
I'm sorry.
Right there.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, is that the property line?
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the property line.
So does the right of way for that cul-de-sac extend to the property line?
Correct.
Okay, so that actually, that cul-de-sac could be made bigger and reach the property line without any property acquisition.
Well,
No,
probably
you're gonna,
not.
It's not going to be your full. It's just the standard width of a road. It's not your standard cul-de-sac right of way bulb. So extending it as a public street, you're not going to meet the city standard. So the idea was, eliminate this cul-de-sac and build a new city standard cul-de-sac up in here, because you don't have the
You don't
room
have
to
it.
do that
Yeah.
down here.
Oh, okay.
I think there'd have to be some kind of part of an agreement that we only plow up to the cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
Even though that new driveway is is in right of way, I don't think we'd want to. I mean, how would you plow it?
No, it's not
Right.
the city. We wouldn't do anything that wasn't up to a city standard.
Okay.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying is it'd have to be understood that the Preserve Boulevard as well as the cul-de-sac gets plowed, but not beyond that.
Well, there's already a driveway there, right?
No, it's just a farm
Just a
field.
Or even that
access.
other road that wasn't a curve, that's...
That's just a dirt road.
Yeah.
I knew the one straight across. But
No, the curve that goes up and curves up. It just goes out to the pond.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Anything
just
else,
for the
Mr.?
record, Minnetrista's little tornado last night.
Yeah, I know.
It hit me.
It hit
right
you.
smack
I
dab
know.
in the middle.
I was
Took
out
all
there.
my farm fence. It
Yeah.
took out all the big trees in my yard. Oh God, it was.
It's awful. I know.
So, anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll feel sorry.
Yeah, maybe I'll feel sorry for you. All right. So there's a couple people here this evening. Mr. Lewis or Mr. Holzheiser, would you like to care to make any comments? You're certainly welcome to. Okay, because, yeah, well, but if you have comments, it would be a good time to make them. So this is sketch plan, not preliminary, but still.
Hi, I'm Kris Lewis. I live at 1240 Preserve Boulevard. Can we bring back up the same slide that we were on, please?
The one with the cul-de-sac?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The aerial?
The aerial, yeah.
Thank you. So one of the questions that I had was really two. I do have a comment on the driveway. So as you can see, this is our property line, and then this is Don's property line.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the driveway goes through, it would essentially be kind of hugging the property line, right?
Right.
There's been comments here about the long driveway. I guess I would say is if the subdivision goes through, I would actually prefer a long driveway as opposed to a short driveway. And I don't know, but I would think that the property owner, if you can pan down a little bit, just pull this down. There is which not shown here, is that there is I think the house is right here. So I'm not sure if it's right here, if it's right here, but I think it's right here.
I think that's right.
Is that right? So I'm assuming, I don't know this, but I'm assuming that that property owner, since they built off of Deer Creek Road and set back pretty far up the road.
Is that the new house?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I'm assuming they don't want a house right there.
Sure.
And then we really don't either. to tell you the truth. So we would prefer, if a house gets built, that it gets built where it's drawn, despite the long driveway.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, my question to staff would be, so this lot gets platted and it's, does the city have a say as long as the house meets setback requirements? Does the city have a say in terms of where they can build?
No. I mean, the city's say is enacted through the ordinances that we have. So the setbacks and the different, placement requirements, the floodplain requirements, things like that. I mean, that's how we put our stamp of approval on them.
So there's no way the city can say the driveway goes. We can't even say where the driveway goes, can we? Or
well, in a shared driveway instance, I mean, you can get specific with that. I mean, they're looking at variances in this case for the lot width.
Okay.
So if you want them to conform in some way, but no, Madam Mayor and Council, the only thing we have regarding driveways is the width at the road right of way maximum length.
Right.
We generally try to keep them out of drainage and utility easements.
Right.
However, there's not a permit required, so there's no way of ensuring that they're going to stay out of a drainage and utility easements. You can look to help guide the applicant and tell them where you want something to go, but if he's not the one building the house and someone in the future is, they might have different ideas and different desires moving forward. We have our required setbacks, and we ask them to show that you can indeed build on a proposed lot meeting setback requirements, and so thus far they've done that.
Mm-hmm. And there's at least two potential sites, maybe even three. I mean, okay.
Well, it depends on how you slice it. You could be 100 of them.
Well, yeah. I'm saying either there, yeah. So, I mean, I just want to make, yeah.
So my comment was actually in reaction to the Planning Commission's comment, because they were basically, there was a lot of discussion about, gosh, we would recommend, meeting the Planning Commission, we would recommend a shorter driveway and putting it up on that hill, and that is disadvantageous, if you will, to both our property and I would assume the new owner. So that's why I'm bringing it up.
Sure.
Fully recognizing that they're going to have the right to put it wherever they want.
Yeah. Okay. That's just what I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
So okay.
And the second comment that I have, and it's really more of a question, is that I don't quite understand what the conservation agreement with MnDOT specifies in terms of both land management and access.
Well, good question. Maybe Mr. Benson could. Okay. Now, did you create these wetlands or restore the wetlands? Okay, and then did you bank them? Is that the deal? Okay, so what it is with wetland banking is he creates the wetlands or restores the wetlands, and he gets a certain amount of credit, if you will, and then then there's a bank, so to speak, that holds these wetlands, and then they can be sold, but nobody comes here and takes them. They're sold as credits for projects if a wetland is filled elsewhere. So this is in the Pioneer-Sarah Creek. Usually the Pioneer-Sarah Creek might say, okay, you can buy wetland bank credits from this gentleman who owns them, and because you're doing something in that watershed. But it doesn't, but they have to stay wetlands in perpetuity. They should always remain as a wetland. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I just, I don't think I got the contract, so if you could resend it to me, please. I don't think I got the contract.
Yeah, I sent you the certificate.
Well, you can discuss it, but maybe that is that.
Well,
I think that
there's another variable in play here,
okay.
And that is that we might be a potential buyer
okay.
of the property.
Okay.
And I wanted to understand what were the restrictions, surrounding the wetland. I can tell you that we don't want it disturbed.
Yeah,
right?
you wouldn't be able to do that.
In understanding what would be MnDOT's, essentially engagement on a go-forward basis in terms of managing the wetland, and then how would they access it?
I don't think it's a MnDOT issue.
It's a Bowser. It's a Board of Water and Soil Resource issue, but It depends on, I don't know, Mr. Benson, has all the wetlands been purchased, do you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so the wetland credits, you wouldn't be able to sell them anymore because they've already been sold, but you would, as a new owner, be responsible to maintain the wetlands. And you couldn't fill them. And Andrew, maybe you can step in if you know any differently, but you would not be allowed to fill them. You would have to maintain them as wetlands. Sometimes there might be some maintenance, again, depending on how much, maybe minimal maintenance. It depends that you'd have to do, but okay.
My contract is with MnDOT.
Okay. It's with MnDOT. You need to go to the...
There's a contract with them, and it's a long affair, and they are responsible for maintaining the
because they bought them.
They bought them.
They bought them. Okay.
And they're supposed to maintain native species.
Okay.
They're supposed to keep the exotics out, and it goes on and on.
Okay.
And on.
And you have a contract to that
There is a
effect.
contract for that.
That kind of answers your question. So the wetlands went to the Board of Water Soil Resources. They banked them. MnDOT needed them probably for a project that they were doing, so they purchased them from that bank. So they're then, according to that contract, then responsible.
Right, and so our interest would be, are they going to continue to, periodically they do, things such as prescribed burns.
Right.
They don't do it as often as they used to do it
Mm-hmm.
because, it's, more or less been restored.
Right.
But are they going to continue to do that? I'm hoping yes, but I'm also wondering, well, then how do they access the proproperty?
Well,
right? What
again,
rights does MnDOT have?
Yeah, so that would again be, you'd have to read the contract that that Mr. Benson referred to, and access to the property. Usually, in a case like this, you'd have to grant them access.
Well, they'd have it as part of the agreement,
and it would be part of that's what I was going to say.
Does this changing of the plot change how they access the wetlands?
No, I wouldn't.
So that I don't know because I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Maybe Mr. Biggerstaff can answer that.
Mayor and Council, the way that MnDOT and other state agencies generally do this is that on a large piece of property like this, they would take a blanket easement to access it. I would have to read the contract just like anybody else would to tell you whether changing it. If they have affirmative obligations under the contract, I think they'll be willing to work with the property owner and the new property owners in terms of refining that if necessary. But if they have to do something to maintain or preserve the wetland, then they'll need to get to it. Odds are they probably have those rights under the agreement, but we would just have to review that.
Yeah. And that's something
we have to reflect that though
not in the sketch plan.
Not in the sketch plan, and perhaps stepping back, the fact that we've now redivided this, and now that contract could potentially, I don't know how much of this wetland is part of that, but that wetland probably was done as one property owner. Now it could potentially go against three. Do all three property owners have to provide that right away? And do we have
access, you're saying?
Yeah, that access, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And do we have to note that when we submit the plat that all three of them have to, or just one? Do we have to specify that? I
think that's something that we would certainly look at when we did a plat opinion letter, like we do with any subdivision. So we would review the title work. One of the questions we'd look at is what is the scope of MnDOT's access rights?
Mm-hmm.
Have those been recorded against the property as it currently sits? Because then it would carry forward to any future owners of that property or subdivisions of that property. So those are all questions that, as the mayor points out, we would look at as we look forward towards preliminary plat approval and things like that. Mm-hmm. And we could address those issues if this was a project that moved forward.
Mm-hmm. Does that help, Mr. Lewis? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, I'm just trying to do,
right.
all the due diligence here.
Yeah.
So
right.
Just understanding
okay.
the ramifications.
Okay.
So,
yeah. Okay. Anybody else have questions or comments? No? All right. Okay. So obviously, shared driveways aren't really our preference. But sometimes, as we found out in the previous one as well, there's kind of a no-win situation, no other alternative.
Oh, I do have one other question.
Yeah.
The cul-de-sac, can you bring up the aerial again, please, David? Going over to the cul-de-sac on Rainbow, is there, what we're seeing here actually in the last page of our packet, is that how it's currently built?
I think that's a proposal that would have to be in for Preserve Boulevard. Is that correct?
No,
That's the city standard. Is
Yeah.
that the detail plate?
So
Yeah.
I'm looking at the last page of our packet, and it shows the city standard.
Yep.
Right.
How does it compare to what's already there?
To the Rainbow one?
Yeah.
Similar.
Okay. So I'm just wondering, this shows, a 5-foot concrete walk, curb and gutter. Would all that be put in there?
No, we're not asking them to.
Okay.
No. The idea with that, Mr. Molitor, was to put that over to eliminate the existing one on Preserve and put that new city standard one up in here.
But we're not doing that.
Well, I mean that's up to you
Oh, okay.
as to whether or not you want to request that. Again, that was just something that was thrown out as a comment.
So then if we did that, then there would not be a shared driveway because you'd have two separate driveways.
Correct. You'd want to design those lots so that now you'd probably eliminate the need for a variance. And then you could have those two lots have access off of a public cul-de-sac. And then you'd have this lot over here on Rainbow have access off of the public cul-de-sac. So, correct.
Okay.
To do that would cost the city, or would that be?
It'd be on the developer, but you're talking about having to invest fair amount. I mean, I'm guessing maybe, $100,000? Or more?
Possibly, yes, depending on what the soils are in the area for corrections.
I mean, it could be quite
Well, I mean,
expensive for two lots.
Well, but let's talk about this a little bit more. I mean, I don't think it has. I realize it's the city standard here, but I don't see a need for a 5-foot sidewalk out there going around all that. I think that seems a little excessive. I mean, does that make more sense that perhaps we scale back the requirement here of not, this I get it. We have the city standard and there's reason for that. And if we had 25 houses on a cul-de-sac, we definitely want to do this. But for two houses, two lots, does it make more sense to do a scaled-down version of this and then eliminate the need for the shared driveway and eliminate the need for the variance?
Okay, so one of the reasons there's city standards, it also has to do with plowing. So if you were to say, let's do a scaled-down version, you may have an issue. It's with the plows turning around.
We already have a scaled-down version right there. I mean, if you take...
Well, I think, if I may, Madam Mayor and Council, I mean, to be similar to something that was done in Waterset, where they weren't held to the full city detail plate. The size is the same, but it doesn't have all the concrete that you're talking about.
Right.
It'd be something similar to that is what would go
Because it would seem like it would clean up a lot of issues with the existing one. We don't have the plowing issue. It seems like it would be something worth exploring.
Well, the only thing...
Just to eliminate a shared driveway, putting that much asphalt in, I don't think makes any sense. You've got the one cul-de-sac this way, and you're talking about extending another one further into the land.
No,
I think the whole idea is to try to minimize the impact on all this land.
No, well, that's not what I'm saying. You would get rid of the one that's already there, extend the road up, and you.
But that would also then be another. That again. Now you're talking
you'd have,
quite a lot.
You'd have this over there, which is a heck of a lot of asphalt. Takes up a lot of ground, a lot of natural ground for.
It's not really just. It's moving consistently north. Sorry.
Well, the only thing, Mr. Molitor, is I look at a couple things. One, I look at the disruption to the existing neighborhood as one, and in order to do what you're suggesting, it would be more than just the cost of creating a new cul-de-sac, it would also be the cost of extending the preserve boulevard up to the new cul-de-sac, but then it would also be removing the old cul-de-sac and restoring that property on where it currently is a cul-de-sac. All of that for 2 lots, for actually one. I mean, if we were looking at this as one lot, let's just say one lot, we wouldn't even be thinking. So you're talking about a huge expense for one extra lot. I mean, that it would almost not make it feasible to subdivide then. I mean, it's a pretty significant expense when I think about how much all that would cost. But Mr. Lewis, you wanted to quick?
Yeah, I have 2 more points, I guess. So one is in regard to the tree line there, and I would just ask both the applicant or the developer, depends on who develops the land, but I would like to at least minimize the environmental impact potentially.
Can you
ask that
point out the trees?
Be preserved. This group of trees right here.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know what the city requirements are on. I know when we built our house, we didn't have any trees.
Right.
And you guys took a tree deposit on a tree that I'm not sure where it existed, but nonetheless, we got it back. I don't think we got interest on it, but so that was
okay.
I did not lost it.
So the tree, I'm not, again, they'd have to follow our tree ordinance, but there's not a lot of trees there, so they probably couldn't remove a lot of trees. The more trees you have, of course, I think it's a percentage that they can remove.
It just would be totally impractical to remove those trees because this is a steep bank going down, and all these trees are on the side of that bank. And I just can't imagine anybody cutting the trees down because then you're just going to have like.
Yeah, I mean, I know Don wouldn't. I'm just concerned about whoever would potentially buy Lot B. That's why I'm just pointing that out.
Okay. Maybe David, you could address.
If the applicants, you're correct, Madam Mayor and Council, our tree preservation ordinances really isn't going to come into effect because there are so little trees on this site. But it's always, if the applicant's willing to put an easement over the top of those trees, I mean, that you can certainly ask him to do that.
Sure.
And if they're willing to do that, you can move forward with a preliminary plat and show that is in a
that we'd like to
conservation easement or whatever you know. If they're willing to do that.
And then I remember my last comment, and then I'll sit down.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Abel, earlier in the meeting, prior to us getting on the topic of this potential subdivision, you had made a comment about bringing subdivisions and ordinance into compliance. So I would just ask that if we move forward, if the city moves forward with this proposal, right, as is, that at a later date, the city does not come back and say, you know what, Preserve Boulevard and the cul-de-sac is not in compliance, so therefore we want to extend Preserve Boulevard, put in a cul-de-sac up there, right, and potentially, sock me and the other property owners with some potential assessment. I would rather have that be done now if, in fact, it's going to be required in the future. So I don't know. I didn't know if that's where you're.
No.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't talking about this particular instance, but.
No, I mean, just in terms of a road reconstruction, I mean, that's a little different. I mean,
that
they can't make you
have to
do anything with this particular property unless you're proposing to do what this gentleman's proposing to do right now. That's the time and opportunity to have the discussion that they're having. So.
Right.
I understand your concern, Mr. Lewis. So, thank you. What we could do is, this might kind of be halfway in between. We could say we want the right of way for a future cul-de-sac. Or he could put in a cul-de-sac but not pave it until such time as, I don't know. But that the city would only, I don't know, there might be some options there. I just can't see putting in more pavement for 2 lots.
Well, you're really not. You're just extending the pavement that's already there. But regardless of that, I think, when item you brought up, Mr. Lewis, is your potential interest in Lot B. If that's the case, that kind of changes the dynamic of the need for driveways.
My interest right now would primarily be in Lot C.
Lot C?
Lot C.
Either one, I guess, changes my view on the need, because if then we're down to one driveway, unless you're planning on putting a house there. It kind of depends if that lot's.
For as long as we would own the property, we would have no intent to put the second house there. But obviously, if it's already been split, we would want to retain the right. I mean, we could
sure
not to.
Exactly, right. We'd have to address the driveway now.
Right, but I mean that makes it a different discussion, because then if there's, as long as it's not in the foreseeable future, a lot of things can change between now and whenever they may or may not decide to do that. But if there were, within the next X number of years, there's no house there, then yeah, that probably doesn't make any sense to extend the cul-de-sac to that point. So.
And just my 2 cents. What Mr. Lewis decides to do or not do is going to be in the future, and he's obviously not making the decision now. I don't think there's a point in forcing them to spend more money, a lot of money to extend that cul-de-sac up and to take more land and to just disrupt things there. I don't see a point in doing that, especially if in the future he does decide to do that. It minimizes that need anyway.
The only thing I would say is if you could take the easement for a future cul-de-sac, but not have them put it in. And then that would guarantee the city you can always vacate the easement too down the road. But that way you actually would have, it would be privately used. It would be gravel or whatever, but I don't know. That might be another option.
The buck goes to the city then, Madam Mayor and Council, and then of course you might have that expectation that when does that get built, and as you mentioned, the cost. I guess
right.
Just a fear for something to consider.
Yeah.
If you were to do that,
right.
It'd be harder to. You'd be paying for that then.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So no cul-de-sac. And I'll leave it as is until it divides more than it would be a shared driveway with a variance. So it sounds. Any comments, Mr. Tschumperlin, Ms. Mortenson?
No, I just want to comment, and Mr. Benson said this as well. The planning committee did approve of it. The notes are exactly as the conversation went, and I think it's all well done.
And so, so the other thing, I believe, if I'm looking at this plat correctly, the new driveway would kind of skirt on the west side of those trees. Is that what I'm seeing here?
East side.
On the second.
The driveway, as the way I envision it's a short, common driveway about this far.
Right.
And then
That one would go straight, but the other one.
And the other one would go up to the B lot. I think B is here. This is A, B,
Right.
C.
So what I'm getting at is, if we wanted to see maybe some kind of a conservation for those trees, whatever. If we wanted some kind of conservation for those trees, it looks like that driveway on the B lot does skirt around the trees.
Yeah. You follow it isn't practical to put a driveway over. Like I say, the slope is really great, and from this lot.
There are the trees right there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It looks.
This driveway would go down a little bit, but it would be fairly level all the way up. But then from here it goes up.
Right.
That's where these trees are, right there. But this driveway would be down here.
Right, and go up. And I'm assuming you're not going to put in the driveways?
No, I did in the shared driveway part of it.
Okay.
And then leave it up to if they sell the land, leave it up to the homeowners to put in the rest of the driveway.
Okay. And Mr. Abel, is that acceptable by the city then? I mean, they, okay. All right.
The reason I brought up the trees again is it provides a windbreak, right? And also provides, it would be privacy between Lot B and Lot, well, really.
Existing
that
lot.
part of Lot C is really our lot. I mean, Lot C is really.
Right.
So
Yep.
that's what
Okay. Any other comments?
I will just comment. I don't share the concern about the length of the driveway. If the homeowner wants to put a driveway in that one.
Well, I think we've determined they can put any length driveway they want.
I want to note that because the planning commission noted that they were concerned. I
Right.
don't share that same concern.
Yep.
Whatever they want.
Yep. All right. Okay. Any other comments? Direction for the applicant? All right. That's it then. We're not taking any formal action. It's just kind of to give you direction on what the council wants to see.
Should I get a positive direction?
I'm not sure. I think you are. I think the council's kind of giving a nod of approval. Yeah, okay, we're okay with the shared driveway. You don't have to extend the cul-de-sac. We'd like to see some kind of commitment to preserving those trees, and we really don't have a say on the length of the driveway. So I think that sums it up. All right. So with that, we will go back. Let's see. Hold on. H-I-J-E. Kings Point. Okay, we'll go back to E, and that's approve a 3-year uniform contract for public works maintenance workers.
Madam Mayor, Council, thank you. Yeah, the issue before us is that right now we do not have a contract for our rental uniform or our shop towel service for the public works employees in our shop out there. Since I've been here and many years before that, Mirror Pride has been our vendor, and we're without a contract right now, and we're paying a week-by-week charge. I negated to put in here that charge varies from around $135 a week to $148 a week. Had many conversations with them. They were recently now bought out by Aramark Uniforms and Apparel, and since that service has started, they really have gone downhill. The original delivery driver we had was great. I mean, he would be here on Wednesdays before 3 o'clock. Uniforms would be here, towels, so I say towels, it's shop rags, and detailing towels for the vehicles would be delivered to our shop when it was still open. And since gentleman has retired, the new drivers, we've gotten new drivers weekly. The driver that we had now, the delivery driver, is injured. He is out, so we have gotten different guys every week. Just 2 weeks ago, we did not even get uniforms for our guys. They did not get delivered. They could not find them. They did.
I hope we didn't pay them.
So basically, what we did was, went out and asked 3 different vendors for for quotes for jean shirts, jackets, and coveralls for all of my 8 full-time public employees, as well as the shop towels for the service repair area. Asked them to also provide pricing for at least 3 years. All vendors responded with quotes, including their maximum yearly percentage increase, which is what I use to factor in the number of what the total contract could be. 2 of them have no more increase than 6% per year each year, and one was a maximum increase of 3.5% in year 3 would lock in the price, and that's what I used to calculate. The vendor recommended for the 3-year contract for this service starting October 1st of this year, running through September 30th of 2022, is the Cintas Corporation out of Maple Grove. This made a cost of, as I quote here, $4,492.80 for year 1. Maximum cost at year 2 of with the 6% increase of $4,762.16, and for year 3, $5,447.64, with a total contract over the 3 years of $14,300 $302.60. That is the maximum the contract could be. So basically, asking for a motion to adopt resolution number 112-19 to award the 3-year rental uniform and shop towel services contract with Cintas Corporation, again starting October 1st of 2019, running through September 30th of 2022, at a maximum 3-year price not to exceed $14,302.60.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions?
I have a question. So what are we paying now per month or for year?
It's
per year?
weekly. We are paying $135 to $147. We're at the mercy of a month-to-month, of a week, basically a week-to-week charging.
What is that annually?
Probably at
$7,500.
Say if you do 600 times, 12.
About $700, about $7,500 a year, roughly.
75. So we're paying more now.
Oh, we were paying a lot more now. That's what, and this is, and it's just started as when Ameripride got bought out by Aramark, and it's really increased, and that's where this came along, and really wanted to get new pricing.
Okay. So,
did you get any referrals on this company? Because we're locked in.
Cintas has been around for a long time. They've just bought out G&K, and we're very limited. I mean, you're very limited in the uniform industry, as we're finding out. Everybody's buying everybody out. City Laundry is out of actually Des Moines, Iowa, and they're making their way into the city's area. They are a new vendor. But, yeah, I mean, Cintas has been around for a long time. My son's company uses them at the Southwest Metro Transit. The city, I believe, they do a lot of city contracts. That's why they can get down the price they are. Hutchinson uses them. I believe Waconia uses them. So I mean, they've been around for quite a while.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve the 3-year uniform contract for Public Works maintenance workers?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion? And of course, that's Cintas Corporation. So all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. And next we have a request for approving computer workstation purchases. Mr. Barone.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council. Before you tonight, I have a quotation from Loeffler IT Services. It is to replace 20 workstations. 15 of those would be desktop workstations, and 5 of those would be laptop workstations. We were able to, by assessing the user, convert a few from laptops to desktop, which saved us a little bit of money. This was all driven by the fact that the Windows 7 operating system is scheduled to expire in mid-January of next year. We're not the only ones that are in this boat. The other thing is that I'm sure my staff gets quite upset with me because I'm kind of slow on replacing computers. I'm generally trying to get as much as we can out of what we have, generally dictated by how well they're operating. Sometimes you have a computer breakdown and you just have to replace it, obviously, but as long as they're working, I generally try to do it. But this Windows 7 thing has been something that we've known about for a short time here and know that we got to do it. And so I just brought it forward to replace all of them. There are some security things that we're trying to avoid if you would stay with a Windows 7 computer. And if you looked at the list that I included, the spreadsheet that I included, you can see that there's 15 of them are over in the police department of these 20 computers. The other 5 are here at City Hall for a few workstations, including the front desk point of sale. So they're quite old. The Windows 7 is the main driver here. So instead of trying to bring it to you in pieces, the price really wouldn't change much. What we're up against is just trying to make sure that Loeffler can put us into the mix here and get our needs met before this Windows 7 due date comes and goes. I know they're, as I mentioned in my staff report, they're out about 6-8 weeks already. So I I didn't really touch on the funding out loud here, but I've only bought, I believe, I wrote 7 computers in the last 2 years. None this year, 7 last year. So we have some funds still left from last year's budget that were carried over, and then we have all 15,000 that are still remaining. There would be an additional amount of money that we'd have to take out of another fund, working with Brian to find that. It doesn't really apply, but we did save a little money in the purchase of the new phone system that's about to be installed here in the next number of weeks. So I guess if we had to earmark it, we could say it was from that area, but nonetheless, I think we're able to find it in our contingency for this. And I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barone. Any questions?
What type of operating system is the new ones in? 10?
Yeah, they're all Windows 10 operating systems, yes.
And so these were not upgradable. I mean, they're old, but were they just put in 10 versus 7?
Well, when they were bought, Windows 7 was kind of the system of choice. The newer computers that I have bought in the last couple of years have been Windows 10. So this would match.
So we have some on 10 and some on 7?
Correct.
So that's why we don't see the entire fleet, because I know we have more than 20 computers.
Correct.
So the ones that we
Yep.
don't have have already been...
Correct. These are the ones that are not Windows 10.
When these computers come, do they come loaded with like Office and other?
Yeah, that's all included. The only thing that's proprietary, whether it's the Banyan data systems that's used in finance or the GIS, we just work with Loeffler to make sure that software gets put on these new computers. So,
because I'd suggest if you haven't already, the new computers that Hennepin County and all of the government agencies are running Office 365, which is a cloud version.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't require on-prem servers, and if we're buying this many computers right now, I definitely look into Office 365. It's cheaper than getting clients for all of these. So, and I know Loeffler may not be the person to ask about this, because as a business, they make their money on server software, and I'd suggest talking to your IT person, an IT person that's not Loeffler, about this, because I think it's just something the city needs to look at, going to the cloud like everybody else, because it's a lot cheaper, and they do your backups automatically. You don't have to pay someone to do that. There's a billion reasons.
Well, we have discussed that with Loeffler. It's still on our radar for the future. It's just that the fact that you said it was cheaper, I have not heard that from a lot of people.
It's absolutely cheaper for the cloud version.
And I have not heard that from Loeffler. I understand why you're skeptical of that, but that's not what I've heard, especially with where we're located. So I think that's something I've told them that we've had council members asking about moving in that direction, and we are. I could have had somebody here from Loeffler to kind of explain that to you tonight, what their take is on that, and if you would like, I can. But nonetheless, I still believe that we need to move forward with this purchase here tonight.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we're not. I suggest talking to an independent IT company.
I can certainly do that in the future when we start looking towards doing Office 365. We do have some kind of unique things here at the city that are not really transferable to cloud-based things. A lot of the public safety-related things, whether it's connection to the BCA or BCI, BCA and things of that nature. But yeah, we can certainly. We put it this way: Cassandra and I have been trying to keep that in the front of our minds and not in the back of our minds as we move forward and try to figure out how we're going to do IT services here in the future. So, yeah.
Well, and Hennepin County has an IT person that might be willing to come in and talk to the
I would
city.
certainly like to pick their brain if that's the case. Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve the purchase of the computer stations as presented in our packets. I think it was a total of
$24,558.
$558.
And 52 cents. Correct.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments? Hearing none. All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. So next we have the reseeding of 2 parcels on Halstead. It's reseeding for 7515 Halstead Drive and 7525 Halstead Drive.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, yes. This is used to accept the quote to reseed the areas mentioned at 7515 and 7525. The driveway at 7515 Halstead Drive was realigned with the Halstead project due to the road being elevated, shall we say. With the alignment, it needed to be have each side of the driveway had to be redone. It was slated for regrading and reseeding, which was done, and unfortunately 2 days after that work was done, we had a major rainstorm, and it washed everything away. After several discussions, which came here between you guys, it was determined that we were not going to sod the area, and that slit seeding would be done, and they are in agreement with that at that property. And also the boulevard area at 7525 Halstead Drive, which is right next door, was restored with a low-maintenance seed mix, which is mostly a fescue-type grass. That resident there has requested the area be reseeded with a seed mix that contains more turf grass, which is more maintainable for him because he did mow it in the past and would like to continue to mow it weekly from here on out. We did ask for 2 quotes from 2 companies, Neaton Brothers and True Green, to apply a herbicide first off to combat any of the weeds that have come into the area, and then to slit seed the area, and then to both areas, and then to fertilize, actually with a starter fertilizer in each area. Only one contractor returned a quote due to busyness, I suppose. Summaries below. To do 7515 Halstead Drive would be with it, and that's again with a herbicide application, the slit seed, and the fertilization, $653, and $449 for the other area for a total of $1,102. This would be paid, funded from the Halstead Drive improvements. So we would be looking to have a motion to adopt the resolution numbers 114-19 and 115-19 to accept the quotes and authorizing the expenditure of funds to reseed the areas at 7515 Halstead Drive and 7525 Halstead Drive.
Thank you, Gary. Any questions? Hearing
So was 7525, which were restoring because the original seed mix wasn't, was that, do we always use a certain seed mix, or is it up to the neighborhood, or how?
The seed mix that was chosen was used throughout the area. It was kind of a low maintenance, and
it's kind of like a right of way. If
it's more of a right of way mix
yeah.
where it's more or less where you're not going to be mowing it weekly. It's a once a month type, kind of almost like what we call a ditch mix.
Okay.
But they would like to have more of a turf grass where they could maintain again once they had it, which is notable. And on that thought, Ms. Fauske and I have talked about that in the future to look at properties on future projects to make sure that the areas that are being maintained currently as a turf area, as a weekly mowing, certainly in future projects, that those areas would stay, and yet the other turf would be maintained as with the low maintenance. So
Good.
that it's been discussed. So in the future, we don't run into this issue again.
Good, thanks.
All right. So do I have a motion? And let's just say it's a motion for Resolution 114-19 and 115-19 to approve the quotes for reseeding at 7515 and 7525 Halstead Drive.
So moved.
A motion was made by Ms. Mortenson and seconded by Ms. Bruce. Any further questions? Hearing none. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. So that does conclude our, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, all of our business items, and we move on to administrative items. Staff reports, Mr. Barone.
I've had
Gary snap a few pictures. As you know, our guys were out a lot in the last day or so.
Right.
But these are the sights and scenes from our area of town hit by our tornado. Thankfully, nobody was injured or hurt or killed, but there was a lot of storm damage, so I'm just having David kind of scroll through.
Wow.
That's on Chateau. Yeah.
Yeah. Gary could tell you where they are, but
Yeah.
nonetheless.
I know where that is.
Yeah.
So, a lot of damage. And then they had, what was it, Saturday? You had the Sunday.
It's on 15.
They had a water main break.
Water
so
main
these guys
break.
are quite busy over there.
Yeah.
Holiday weekend, so
Yeah.
not much of a holiday.
And some of these.
It was Labor Day for us.
Yeah, there you go.
Labored quite a bit.
Yeah, we did labor.
And some of these pictures have already been somewhat cleaned up. I did go out again. I did too go out this morning and talk to people and drove around and saw.
And hats out to my guys. I mean, they
Yeah.
just went at it. I mean, I talked to several homeowners as that were out there. My guys got there. I mean, we've cleared all of Hickory, all of Chateau except for one. Now the resident has pulled his stuff up there. All of Bertram has been cleaned up. So we do have, and then one at, I can't remember the address, but the one on the north side of County Road 15 near Chateau has been cleaned up. Talked to other neighbors. They know we were coming to help them out and stuff. So it's, it's knock on wood, it's gone really great.
Yeah.
So
well, knock on wood, there were no injuries and no major damage to homes. It was barns and sheds, and I believe a trailer. That's a trailer that might.
Yeah, I think it's one shed has its roof ripped off. One shed had the garage door and the siding taken off, and then one roof up. But otherwise,
So
much.
Yeah,
So.
and yes, kudos to your guys
There's
and the police department as well. So, yeah. All right. Thank you. Anything else?
That's all I got.
All right. Are there any council reports? I'm going to forego. I don't have any right now. So, Ms. Mortenson?
WCC meeting is going to be on the 19th at 5:30, which is different, at the Gillespie Center. And I did attend the Planning Commission meeting on 8/26.
Okay.
Nothing to report.
Okay.
I had a meeting with Chief Weber, St. Bonnie Fire, and it was just the two of us because we couldn't get another date for the other commissioners to meet. And the most important outcome of that is that they did end up increasing their budget 1%. I sent those numbers to Mr. Grimm, and that's all I have.
All right. So with that, if there's a motion to adjourn, we can be adjourned.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Mortenson made that motion, and Ms. Bruce seconded. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much.